Hello everyone, this is Top Romance Stories. Before watching the video, please take 3 seconds to like the video and subscribe to the channel so I have more motivation to create more high-quality videos. Thank you all very much, and I wish you a happy new day. The story begins at the academy behind the mountain, where the plants grew lushly. A beautiful girl curiously looked at the glowing plants in the forest. How is it glowing? I should pick this and take it back. She gently touched the plant, and her mind suddenly grew dizzy. I must study it. Before she could finish her sentence, she fainted. After that, I lost consciousness. She then transmigrated into another body. What on earth happened to me? My body. Why can't I move? The door to the room was suddenly pushed open. A girl in ancient clothing walked in and ordered the maids. All of you leave. This young lady wants to say a final goodbye to my elder sister. She walked to the side of the coffin and looked at the person inside with a cold smile. Jiang Jinhua, as a venomous woman, what does it feel like to be poisoned to death by heart-burning powder? Jiang Jinhua, lying in the coffin, pondered. Heart-burning powder, that is. Her brows furrowed tightly. Oh, my head hurts so much. Some images are appearing in my mind. In a study, a woman sat seductively in a man's lap and said, "You said that as long as I complete this matter for you, you will marry me, right?" The man smiled and coaxed the woman in his arms. Of course. Jiang Jinhua, holding a book, stood hidden to the side, shocked and in disbelief. Why is Jin Tu in the study with a man? The book in her hand suddenly fell to the ground. Jiang Jin turned her head alertly. Who's there? She hurriedly urged the man, "You should go first." Jiang Jinhua panicked and quickly turned to run. Oh no, I have to get out of here quickly. Unfortunately, she tripped on the hem of her dress and fell to the ground. At that moment, Jiang Jinhua also walked out and looked coldly at Jiang Jinhua, who had fallen to the ground. "It's you, sister." She walked over with a vicious expression and stuffed a poison pill in her mouth. "Elder sister, don't blame me for being cruel. It's you who stood in my way." Jiang Jinhua's face turned purple and blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. She looked at Jiang Jintu with anger and unwillingness. "I don't want to die. I hate this. I can't die. As for that despicable couple, I will drag you to hell with me." In a dark space, she looked at the palm of her hand in shock. "So you brought me here from the modern world. You were poisoned to death by this younger sister?" Thinking of this, Jiang Jinhua frowned. "I'm in danger. I must wake up quickly." Jiang Jintu's face contorted with anger, and she snorted coldly. "This face of yours, even in death, is still so detestable." She then pulled out a dagger and smiled viciously. "This dagger is coated with poison. For a venomous woman like you, sister, even if you die, if your face rots afterward, I'm sure no one would suspect anything, right?" She then raised the dagger, aiming straight for her. Suddenly, Jiang Jinhua's eyes flew open. She raised her hand and tightly gripped Jiang Jintu's wrist. Jiang Jintu's face turned pale with fear. "A ghost!" She fell to the ground in fear and screamed. "A ghost!" Jiang Jinhua sat up from the coffin and looked at her. Jiang Jintu. Jiang Jintu trembled with fear. "You know, it's impossible. I must be dreaming." Seeing Jiang Jinhua step out of the coffin, she trembled and backed away in fear. Jiang Jinhua bent down and picked up the dagger from the ground. "Dreaming? Then I'll have to wake you up." She squatted down and used the dagger to lift Jiang Jintu's chin. "What did you just say? What poison is on the dagger?" Jiang Jintu's face was pale with fear, her eyes welling with tears as she looked at the dagger at her throat. "No, nothing. Elder sister, we sisters have a deep bond." Jiang Jinhua let out a cold laugh. "Ah, a deep bond between sisters." She stood up and gave a faint smile. Jiang Jintu, did Jinhua die a miserable death? Jiang Jinhua smiled coldly and raised the dagger. Looking at Jiang Jintu, "I'll have you buried with me. A life for a life." Jiang Jintu scrambled to crawl away in fear. "No, it wasn't me. It was the fourth prince. The fourth prince wanted me to do it." Jiang Jinhua was stunned. The fourth prince, the original owner's fiancé. Jiang Jintu, thoroughly terrified, scrambled to get out. "Help! Help me!" She frantically pounded on the door. "Help! The corpse has come back to life." The servants and maids outside looked at each other in shock. "What happened? Quick!" That's the second young Mrs. voice. The door was opened. In the morning hall, Jiang Jinhua stood to one side, looking at the terrified and disheveled Jiang Jintu on the floor. She tightened her grip on the dagger. "Jiang Jinhua, your revenge? I will definitely get it for you." A flame of hatred flashed in her eyes. In the small courtyard, the maids whispered fearfully. Have you heard? The eldest young miss who died a few days ago suddenly came back to life. I heard the windows of her room are all covered with black cloth. She must have turned into a ghost. Also, it seems concubine Chun has invited a master to come. Over here, Jiang Jinhua was still leisurely drinking tea. A cold smile touched the corner of her lips, just in time. Jiang Jinhua looked thoughtfully at the teacup in her hand. A master, you say? At this moment, a loud noise came from outside. A middle-aged woman led a group of people to the courtyard. Master, this way, please. Concubine Chen looked fearfully at the Taoist priest behind her and said frantically, our house has a female ghost. Master, you see. The Taoist priest stroked his beard and smiled confidently. A mere female ghost is nothing to me. What's more, with the dragon aura of 2 princes suppressing it, she definitely won't be able to escape. 7th Prince, Jin Nanjun. 4th Prince, Jin Nankong. The Taoist priest then burned the talisman in his hand. He pretended to be performing a spell, looking at the large gate before him. Evil spirit, be gone. Go. The Taoist priest then raised his foot and kicked the courtyard gate hard. Inside the room, Jiang Jinhua, dressed in a beautiful white outfit, sat beside the stone table enjoying her tea. She raised her head to look at the people outside and asked, Younger sister, what do you need me for? Jin Nanjun looked at her in astonishment. How can this be a female ghost? She's clearly a little fairy. Jiang Jin too was terrified, her expression frantic. This is bad. She then pretended to be weak, her eyes welling with tears as she looked at Jiang Jinhua, playing the part of a loving sister. Elder sister, I know you died with grievances, but this is our home. I'm begging you, please return to where you belong. Jiang Jinhua held her teacup and looked at her in silence. Jiang Jin too, this gentle and weak facade of yours. I will definitely tear it down. She then placed the teacup on the table and smiled at her. You say I'm a ghost. So how can I stand under the sun without anything happening? The Taoist priest was stunned and shouted, not afraid of the light. She must be a vengeful spirit. Jiang Jinhua stepped forward and shouted angrily, Nonsense! How dare you slander the legitimate daughter of the general's manor? Who gave you, a charlatan, the audacity? The Taoist priest snorted coldly and looked at her. This humble Taoist is a direct disciple of Master Zhang from Yunding Mountain. I will not let you, an evil spirit, cause trouble. Concubine Shun and Jiang Jinda stood behind, smiling coldly and smugly at her. Jiang Jinhua narrowed her eyes and looked at him coldly. Cause trouble? She gave a beautiful smile and said, I am a living, breathing person. Yet you dare to call me an evil spirit? Aren't you afraid that your wild accusations will bring shame to your sect? Jin Nanjun smiled with great interest as he looked at her. 4th brother, your fiancé, after dying, seems to be a bit more interesting than before. Jin Nankong snorted coldly and said nothing. The Taoist priest frowned at her. Came back to life for no reason, and you're not an evil spirit? He raised his hand and ordered the servants behind him. Men, seize her. The servants quickly replied, Yes, sir, and rushed forward. Jiang Jinhua shouted angrily, I'd like to see who dares. She let out a cold laugh. Ha, ha, Jiang Jinhua has indeed come back from the dead. Jin Nanjun and Jin Nankong were stunned. Jiang Jintu's face turned pale with fear as she continuously backed away. Elder sister, please go. Don't make such a scene and scare the princes. Do you want to bring shame to father? Jiang Jinhua sighed. No, the reason I was able to come back to life is because I refined a soul-returning pill. Jin Nanjun and Jin Nankong were stunned and looked at her in shock. What? A soul-returning pill? The small courtyard echoed with astonished voices. A soul-returning pill. The officials outside looked at each other in shock and whispered amongst themselves, a medicinal pill that can bring the dead back to life. I never thought it actually existed. Concubine Shun shouted in a panic. Nonsense. She quickly looked at the officials behind her and explained, My lords, you absolutely cannot let this demoness speak such nonsense. Nonsense. Suddenly, a hand was raised, cutting her off. Jin Nankong walked closer to Jiang Jinhua and asked, Can you really refine a soul-returning pill? Jiang Jinhua gave him a cold smile. He took the bait. Outwardly, she gave a gentle smile and replied, "A few days ago, I met a master in my dream. He said he and I were fated, so he passed on to me the method for refining the soul returning pill. After waking from the dream, I followed the old man's instructions and exhausted all my efforts to refine one pill." Jiang Jinhua then took a small wooden box from her sleeve. "Because I didn't know its effects, I never said anything. My personal maid, Yuling, also knows about this. So, right after I died, Yuling fed the pill to me, which is how I was able to wake up. If you all don't believe me, you can cross-reference with Yuling." Jin Nankong looked at Yuling and asked, "Yuling, is this really true?" Yuling was frightened and quickly knelt on the ground, saying, "This servant, Yuling, reports to the fourth prince. This is indeed true." Jin Nankong frowned and was silent for a moment. After a while, he looked at Jiang Jinhua. "Jinhua," he took her hand and said gently, "Although I want to protect you, coming back from the dead is indeed an unnatural phenomenon. The words of a mere maid, how can they convince the high-ranking officials?" Jiang Jinhua narrowed her eyes and looked at him coldly. "Protect me?" She pressed her lips together tightly. "If Cam 2 hadn't revealed everything, I would have actually believed your devilish words." Jiang Cam Hoa pushed his hand away and let out a faint laugh. "That great master also said that after taking the soul-returning pill, within 2 days when the sun sets, a halo of light will shine down. That is a sign from the heavens." Jiang Cam too looked up at the sky and said pretentiously, "Oh my, the sun has just set. What kind of sign could elder sister possibly receive from the heavens? This is the will of the heavens. How would I know?" Jiang Cam too pretended to be weak and started her act. "Elder sister, don't you know that if you delay any longer, waiting until it's dark will harm people?" Jiang Cam Hoa walked toward the crowd and said loudly, "Masters." Suddenly, someone screamed, "She's coming over here." Everyone ran away in fear and panic. "Don't come over here." Jiang Cam Hoa was stunned, her whole body frozen stiff. Suddenly a brilliant light shone upon her. Noyet Lin dropped to her knees and shouted, "A halo for the sky. It's a sign from the heavens." The masters looked at her in astonishment. A goddess. This is a goddess manifesting. Such a brilliant halo. Is it a sign from the high heavens? Jiang Cam too looked at her in shocked panic. Jiang Cam Hoa gave her a cold smile. Then she pretended to be weak and looked at Concubine Tran. "Concubine, you didn't believe I was alive. I don't blame you. Fortunately, the truth is now clear. You can be at ease now, Concubine." Concubine Tran gave her a forced smile. As a concubine, I must investigate matters in the residence clearly. Cam Hoa has just come back from the dead. You should rest a bit. We won't disturb you." Everyone turned and left one by one. Kinam Kwan chuckled and looked at her. Things are getting quite interesting." The door was closed. Noyet Lin let out a sigh of relief and looked at her. "Miss, you scared this servant to death today." "That halo, how did you do it, miss?" Jiang Cam Hoa held up a string with a piece of colored glass. "It was all thanks to this. Beforehand, I carefully calculated the angle and the time. I placed this on the tree, and the light passing through the colored glass refracted into many colors. Plus, I was wearing white, which made the effect even more perfect." Noyet Lin's eyes lit up as she looked at her with admiration. "Miss, you are truly amazing." Jiang Cam Hoa smiled and pinched Noyet Lin's cheek. "It's also thanks to you for overhearing the matter about the sorcerer and telling me." Noyet Lin smiled and replied, "Yes, yes." Suddenly, there was a strange noise outside. Jiang Cam Hoa looked outside warily. "Who is it?" A dry twig outside snapped in two. A tall man standing by a tree trunk looked at Jiang Cam Hoa and Noyet Lin in surprise. "You." Jiang Cam Hoa looked at him warily. "Who are you?" The man with a mole under his eye looked at her and answered hesitantly, Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain and spat out a mouthful of blood, his face turning pale. Jiang Cam Hoa and Noyet Lin stared at him, stunned and surprised. Jiang Cam Hoa slowly approached the man. "He's unconscious." Looking at the man passed out against the tree trunk, Noyet Lin looked at her and asked, "Miss, what should we do now?" Jiang Cam Hoa signaled to Noyet Lin, Don't speak so loudly. Bring him into my room." After speaking, the two of them helped the man inside. The towel was wrung dry. Jiang Cam Hoa, with a somber face, wiped the man's body. This man only has some external injuries. But why does he remain unconscious? Behind her, Noyet Lin's small face flushed red as she covered it in embarrassment. Miss is so bold. Suddenly, a thought occurred to Jiang Cam Hoa. Could he be poisoned? Jiang Cam Hoa pulled her hand back in shock. It is. It could be cold poison. A long time ago, a great master once told her, there is no cure. A person born with cold poison can only practice poison arts to preserve their life. He looked seriously at Jiang Kam Hoa kneeling on the ground and said, "This old man can teach you how to make poison. But do you dare to swear that you will not use poison for wicked purposes?" Jiang Kam Hoa raised her head, her eyes resolute as she answered, "This disciple swears it." Returning to the present, Jiang Kam Hoa clutched her forehead in pain. This memory. Noyet Lin looked at her worriedly. Mississippi. Jiang Kam Hoa looked pensively at the unconscious man on the bed. "Consider yourself lucky, kid." She then pulled a small pouch from her sleeve and took out a medicinal pill that a cure for cold poison is not entirely non-existent. Jiang Kam Hoa put the pill into the man's mouth and sighed. "You know my secret. I don't know if saving you is the right or wrong thing to do." Suddenly, a voice called from outside, "Eldest Mississippi." Jiang Kam Hoa was startled and turned her head back. Noyet Lin hugged Jiang Kam Hoa in fear. "We're done for, miss. Someone is here. The matter of you hiding a man cannot be exposed." Jiang Kam Hoa's face darkened with anger. "That who's hiding a man?" She quickly pushed Noyet Lin away. "What is it?" The maid outside hurriedly reported. "The madam is holding a banquet for the two princes and invites the eldest miss to attend." Noyet Lin looked at Jiang Kam Hoa with fear and worry. "Miss, you just ruined the plan of concubine Tran and the second miss today. If you go now, I'm afraid." Jiang Kam Hoa let out a cold laugh, her smile full of confidence. "Change my clothes. What is there to be afraid of? I really want to see what their faces look like right now." In a small courtyard, a beautifully dressed and made-up Jiang Kam Hoa followed a servant to the banquet. "A banquet for the princes. Why would concubine Tran want me to appear and steal all of Jiang Kam 2's spotlight?" Seeing a man approaching from a distance, Jiang Kam Hoa narrowed her eyes. The one who wanted to see me was someone else, as expected. Kanam Khan walked over, smiled at her, and called out softly, "Gum Hua." Jiang Kam Hoa looked at him and asked, "I'll wonder what instructions the fourth prince has for me." Kanam Khan looked at her gently and asked, "This afternoon, I didn't speak up to help you. You won't blame me, will you?" Jiang Kam Hoa turned her face away in distaste, avoiding his hand. "Wait, is that?" She suddenly saw the figure of Jiang Kam, too, lurking in the distance, eavesdropping. Jiang Kam Hoa suddenly broke into a cold smile. She raised her head, tightly grasped Kanam Khan's hand, and looked at him with teary eyes. "Fourth prince, with your noble status, how could Kam Hoa dare to hope for you, to speak up for me?" Kanam Khan quickly hugged her tightly. "When I heard you had met with a mishap earlier, I was heartbroken. Fortunately, you were able to refine the soul-returning pill. But I wonder what method you used to refine it. And are there any side effects?" he asked, probing her carefully. Jiang Kam Hoa pushed him away and pretended to sigh. "The fourth prince also knows that I suddenly lost my life earlier. I'm still investigating who did it. As for refining the soul-returning pill, I have no way to be certain either." Kanam Khan looked at her, stunned, and asked, "Kam Hoa, have you found anything out?" Jiang Kam Hoa answered hesitantly, "About that, earlier my second younger sister said." Kanam Khan grabbed her tightly and asked urgently, "What did she say?" Jiang Kam Hoa pretended to be startled and looked behind him with a small cry. "Da-da." Kanam Khan followed her gaze and looked. Behind him, Jiang Kam 2's face changed. "Oh no." Kanam Khan shouted angrily. "Who is so bold as to follow me here?" Jiang Kam Hoa grabbed his sleeve and said pretentiously, "Fourth prince, I'm afraid concubine and second sister are getting anxious over there. We should probably go first." Kanam Khan put his arm around her shoulder and nodded in agreement. "All right, let's go." Jiang Kam 2 stood in a corner, grinding her teeth in anger. A while later, at Jiang Kam Hoa's residence, Noyet Lin, holding a jade pendant, ran frantically to Jiang Kam Hoa. "Miss, the young master you saved yesterday is gone. He only left behind a jade pendant." Jiang Kam Hoa was surprised. "He's gone?" The cold poison acted up, yet he could wake up so quickly. "He's truly no ordinary person." She picked up the jade pendant to look at it. "This is a top-grade blood jade. I'll consider it as payment for the medicine." Just then, an angry Jiang Kam 2 kicked the door open and stormed in. "Jiang Kam Hoa, you demoness." Jiang Kam Hoa turned her head and glanced at her. "Demoness? Do you need me to help you sober up? I am the elder sister, the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's residence." Jiang Kam 2 ground her teeth in anger as she looked at her. "What legitimate daughter? Besides that status, what else do you have? You vile, poisonous woman, how dare you compete with me for the fourth prince's favor?" Jiang Kam Hoa raised her hand and slapped Jiang Kam too hard across the cheek. Noyet Lin and the two maids behind them stared at her, their mouths agape in shock. Jiang Kam too was furious and raised her hand to hit Jiang Kam Hoa. You dare to hit me? Jiang Kam Hoa raised her hand and grabbed her wrist. Come to think of it, this hairpin of yours, younger sister, was stolen from me. She then pulled the pin from her hair and let out a cold laugh. This was a gift from the Empress Dowager to me. Jiang Kam too screamed in anger. A poisonous woman like you. You're fundamentally unworthy of something so precious. Jiang Kam Hoa looked at the hairpin in her hand. This thing, she gently stroked the pin once, then put it back in her sister's hair. Younger sister, just wear it well. Jiang Kam too touched the hairpin on her head in surprise, looking at her with confusion. Jiang Kam Hoa turned to leave and said coldly, Today, the Empress Dowager has summoned me to the palace. When I return, I will have a chat with you, younger sister. In the imperial palace, Jiang Kam Hoa looked at the Empress Dowager and the emperor and bowed respectfully. Your subject, Jiang Kam Hoa, pays her respects to your majesty the emperor and to her majesty the Empress Dowager. The emperor smiled and said, No need for formalities. You were summoned to the palace today. You should know why. Jiang Kam Hoa raised her head to look at the emperor and replied, Your subject boldly guesses it must be about the soul-returning pill. The emperor looked at her seriously and said, Everyone says you are the reincarnation of a goddess, able to refine the soul-returning pill that can bring the dead back to life. Are you willing to refine it for us? Jiang Kam Hoa said with difficulty, This matter. She quickly knelt and kowtowed. Your subject has no way to refine it. The emperor angrily slammed his hand on the table and shouted, How audacious! So you were deceiving everyone. Before, Jiang Kam Hoa quickly explained in fear, the soul-returning pill was revealed to your subject by that great master in a dream. But last night, the great master forbade your subject from revealing it. After waking up, your subject discovered she no longer remembers 3 of the medicinal ingredients for the pill. The Empress Dowager frowned at her. Forgot 3 ingredients? Kam Hoa, do you still remember the rest? Jiang Kam Hoa hurriedly reported. Although the method of alchemy is very vague, this servant is willing to try. Even if I cannot refine the soul-returning pill, I can still refine some restorative elixirs for His Majesty the Emperor and the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager looked at her joyfully. You are thoughtful. Stand up and come talk by my side. Jiang Kam Hoa looked up, smiled, and replied, Thank you for your grace, Empress Dowager. She rejoiced inwardly. Thank goodness I studied medicine before. I still remember how to prepare some tonics. The Empress Dowager kindly took her hand. Although your mother was not born of me, I watched her grow up. You don't have a maternal grandmother, so you can just call me maternal grandmother. Kam Hoa, it's been a long time. Without your mother by your side, you must have suffered a great deal. Jiang Kam Hoa suddenly recalled the hairpin the Empress Dowager had given her before. At this moment, the Empress Dowager took off the jade bracelet from her wrist and put on hers. Wait for me to have a token made for you. In the future, visit me in the palace often, and no one will give you trouble. Jiang Kam Hoa looked at the Empress Dowager, moved. Thank you, grandmother. A man hiding in a corner observed her every move, the corners of his lips curling into a slight smile. Little swindler. The tall, handsome man smiled as he looked at her, saying so much, but only the last sentence was true. The carriage traveled through the streets. Inside the carriage, Jiang Kam Hoa held the jade bracelet in her hand, lost in thought. This bracelet is made of the same material as that jade pendant. Could it be that man is from the palace? No, regardless of who he is, as long as he obstructs my revenge, I will not show mercy. Jiang Kam Hoa stepped down from the carriage, and a maid, seeing her return, hurried over to report. Luke Deep greets the eldest young Mississippi eldest young miss. The second young miss invites you to her room for a visit. Noyet Lin shouted angrily. My young miss is not close with your young miss. No. Suddenly, a hand rose to stop Noyet. Lin, Jiang Kam Hoa said with a cold smile. It's rare to be invited by my dear younger sister. How could I refuse? Let's go at once. In a room, the sound of shattering was heard. Jiang Kam too, lying on the bed, angrily knocked over a teacup. Where is Jiang Kam Hoa? She's still not here. At this moment, footsteps were heard. Jiang Kam Hoa walked in and looked at her with a smile. Younger sister, what's wrong? Jiang Kam too roared in anger. You dared to poison me. Jiang Kam Hoa feigned shock, frowning at her. Younger sister, why would you say that? She narrowed her eyes, her gaze cold and sharp as she looked at her. I was just taking precautions against thieves, so I applied a little poison to the jewelry. Jiang Cam, too, trembled with fear. She gritted her teeth in anger and lightly touched the hairpin on her head. It's this thing. Jiang Cam Hoa leisurely began to count. 1, 2, 3 by now. Younger sister, your limbs should have lost all their strength. Jiang Cam, too, roared in fear and anger. If you kill me, father will not spare you. Jiang Cam Hoa let out a soft "oh," stealing an item gifted by the Empress Dowager, then committing suicide out of fear of punishment. Younger sister, do you think this charge is reasonable? She walked over and lifted her chin. After all, you have no proof, do you? Jiang Cam too looked at her in fear. What do you want to do? Jiang Cam Hoa withdrew her hand. She took out a handkerchief and wiped her hand. Return all of my things, and I will give you the antidote. Jiang Cam too, panicked, quickly ordered Luke Deep. Quick, give it to her. Luke Deep took a jewelry box and gave it to Jiang Cam Hoa. Jiang Cam too roared in anger. I've done as you said. Now give me the antidote. Jiang Cam Hoa took the jewelry box and said with a smile, I'm thinking I can spare your life, but she took an antidote pill from a leather pouch and looked at her with a cold smile. The antidote has a price 3,000 taels, no more, no less. Jiang Cam too was furious. In your dreams. Suddenly, she coughed up blood, looking at her blood-filled hand. Jiang Cam too's whole body trembled. Save me. Luke Deep, pay her, quick, give her the banknotes. A moment later, Jiang Cam Hoa looked at the stack of banknotes in her hand, her eyes shining brightly. Chatting with younger sister today was truly delightful. Noyet Lin, holding the jewelry box behind her, smiled. Happily, Jiang Cam Hoa glanced back at Jiang Cam too and said with a laugh, see you next time. Luke Deep supported Jiang Cam too and helped her drink. The antidote. Jiang Cam too panted, glaring angrily as Jiang Cam Hoa left. Just you wait. Let's see how long you can keep smiling. Jiang Cam Hoa and Noyet Lin returned to their quarters together. Noyet Lin looked at her and asked, Young miss, why did you throw away all the jewelry from the second young miss's place? Jiang Cam Hoa held the stack of banknotes and said with a laugh, Things she has used are an eyesore to me. It's better to buy new things than to use those. Jiang Cam Hoa opened her room door and looked grimly at the feather on the floor. When I left earlier, this thing was clearly not here. She let out a cold chuckle. Noyet Lin, I have something to do. You may leave. Noyet Lin quickly replied, Yes. Late at night, Jiang Cam Hoa was lying in bed, fast asleep. Suddenly someone approached and lightly touched her shoulder. Jiang Cam Hoa spun around, holding a bamboo tube, and shot a hidden weapon at the person. The man grabbed her wrist tightly and snorted in annoyance. That was a close call. Jiang Cam Hoa was surprised, looking at him with disappointment in her eyes. So it's you. The man leaned in close to her and chuckled. You're not even scared. Your concubine mother has prepared a man to come to your place. Jiang Cam Hoa frowned deeply and pushed him away. How could an ordinary man touch me? The man stood up straight and looked at her with a half smile. Are you showing off your superior martial arts skills? Jiang Cam Hoa sat up, her cheeks puffed in anger as she looked at him. Of course I'm scared. If concubine mother sent a man like him, I wouldn't stand a chance of resisting. The mysterious man looked at her and said, Oh right, I put him in the closet. He's unconscious. How do you want to deal with him? Jiang Cam Hoa turned her face away and smiled to herself. Although I don't know his identity, at least he bears me no ill will. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps was heard outside. Second concubine, what are you doing? Concubine Tran shouted angrily. Get out of the way. Today, I must uphold the family's discipline on behalf of the master. I saw with my own eyes a man enter No Hoa courtyard. Noyet Lin frantically explained. Noyet Lin has been outside the door the whole time and saw no man enter. You must have seen wrong. The mysterious man smiled and glanced at her. It seems you have some business to attend to. Jiang Cam Hoa's eyes gleamed like a little fox's as she gave him a thumbs up. I have a favor to ask of you. Young master, your martial arts are superb. I'll have to trouble you with this matter. The man let out an annoyed, cold laugh. You really don't stand on ceremony with me. After saying that, he leaped outside. Jiang Cam Hoa watched him. His skills are truly formidable. The room door was pushed open forcefully, and concubine Tran led a group of people inside. Search for me. Jiang Kam Hoa looked at her, and Jiang Kam too, with a cold smile. Concubine mother, second sister, what are you looking for in my room? A servant came over and reported to Concubine Tran. Madam, there's nothing. Concubine Tran was stunned. How is it not as I arranged? At this moment, a maid ran in frantically. Madam, it's bad. Bijha courtyard is on fire. Concubine Tran and Jiang Kam Tu's faces changed. It's on fire. Bijha courtyard was ablaze, and the servants shouted in panic. Get water, get water. Concubine Tran gritted her teeth in anger. My Bijha courtyard. Put out the fire, quickly. A figure appeared in Bijha courtyard. The man, bare-chested, screamed in fear. It's on fire. It's on fire. He got goosebumps all over, such a big fire. Seeing that man, Concubine Tran's jaw dropped in astonishment. Why is it him? Wasn't he supposed to be in Jiang Kam Hoa's room? The maids gathered and whispered amongst themselves. Why is there a man in the second madam's room? That's right, and he's not even wearing clothes. Jiang Kam Hoa let out a cold laugh. Concubine mother, is this the strange man you were looking for? Concubine Tran, as if struck by lightning, screamed in terror. You're talking nonsense. This madam does not know him. The servants and maids glanced at her and whispered, the one having an affair with a man isn't the eldest young miss, but the second madam, taking advantage of the master not being home. Jiang Kam Hoa pointed at the man and ordered coldly, seize this suspicious-looking man and wait for the master to return for questioning. Concubine Tran, terrified, quickly shouted, seize this arsonist for me. The man looked at her in frightened astonishment. Madam, someone came and covered his mouth. MMPH. A servant grabbed him tightly, covering his nose and mouth. Concubine Tran gave a sinister smile, trying to fight me. Jiang Kam Hoa frowned. I'm one step too slow. She walked up to her, bowed, and said, Concubine mother, please rest well tonight. Kam Hoa will not disturb you any longer. After speaking, she and Noyet Lin turned and left. Concubine Tran glared angrily at the two of them. Late at night, as Jiang Kam Hoa and Noyet Lin were on their way back to their quarters, a small stone suddenly landed at her feet. Jiang Kam Hoa was startled. She turned to Noyet Lin and said, you go back first. I want to take a walk alone. Noyet Lin looked at her and quickly replied, yes. After Noyet Lin left, Jiang Kam Hoa spoke with a smile. Come out. Everyone's gone. She looked up in one direction, and the mysterious man appeared, tossing a small stone in his hand. Your prime minister's residence is more lively than an opera. Jiang Kam Hoa looked at him gratefully. For today's matter, thank you very much. The man jumped down and looked at her with a smile. No need for thanks. However, every time I see you, you're plotting against someone. Jiang Kam Hoa said coolly, you overlook the times I'm being plotted against. On the contrary, it's you. You burned down a part of my residence, yet you're not leaving quickly. The man's face darkened as he looked at her, trying to shoo me away. He moved closer to her and asked with a smile, I'm curious. What will you do next? Jiang Kam Hoa moved closer to him and said with a smile, then help me. Take me to the roof of Bijha courtyard. The man looked at her for a moment, then smiled and spoke. Hold on tight. After saying that, he grabbed her and jumped up. Jiang Kam Hoa's cheeks flushed red. She subconsciously hugged the man tightly. The man lowered his head and smiled, looking at her gently. Jiang Kam Hoa and the young man sat on the rooftop. He gazed at her intently, thinking to himself, I'm actually doing this kind of thing with a little girl. Jiang Kam Hoa curiously looked down from the roof. The young man watched her silently and chuckled to himself. But this feeling isn't bad. Jiang Kam Hoa focused. She lifted a tile on the roof. At this moment, the young man quickly wrapped his arm around her waist. Be careful, you might fall. Jiang Kam Hoa said shyly. I know. Inside the room, Concubine Shun was scolding. You can't even handle such a small matter. How did that man end up in my room? The servant girl lowered her head. This servant doesn't know. Concubine Chun was furious. Even my Bijha courtyard was half burned down. Get back to No Hoa courtyard. If anything goes wrong with the task I gave you again, I will definitely not let it slide. Jiang Kam too gently took Concubine Chen's arm and said softly, Mother, for now, you should sleep in my camp pavilion, and we can plan things slowly. On the rooftop, Jiang Kam Hoa put the tile back in its place. She said to the young man beside her, Let's go down. The The young man chuckled to himself. She's getting less and less formal with me. Then he gently held her. They slowly descended together. Jiang Kam Hoa's face flushed red. After landing, Jiang Kam Hoa quickly slipped out of the young man's arms. The young man coughed a few times out of awkwardness. In the main room of Bitch Ha Courtyard, the young man said, "This main room is completely undamaged." The young man crossed his arms and asked, "How did you know they wanted to find that man to deal with you?" Jiang Kam Hoa held a piece of cloth in her hand. "I happened to run into that Mama Lee today and secretly overheard their plan. She took out a token. However, if it weren't for you today, I wouldn't have been so successful." The young man then said, "Ah, so how do you plan to thank me?" Jiang Kam Hoa handed the token to him. "Take it." The young man took it with a puzzled look. "What is this?" "I was thinking." Jiang Kam Hoa leaned in close to the young man. "How about we form an alliance?" "An alliance?" The young man gently stroked Jiang Kam Hoa's chin. "Then what are the benefits?" Jiang Kam Hoa said softly, "I can help you suppress the cold poison." He quickly agreed. "All right, it's a deal." Jiang Kam Hoa smiled at him. She pushed the young man's hand away. "All right." Jiang Kam Hoa didn't forget to remind him, "Don't forget to help me take care of these things." After saying that, she immediately left. The young man stood motionless, watching her. Then he smirked that, "I wonder how this little girl will react when she finds out who I am." He licked his finger with a sinister look that it really makes me look forward to it. That evening at the manor, the master returned to the manor. The prime minister said worriedly, "I went out for disaster relief. How did the courtyard get burned down as soon as I returned?" In the room, Jiang Kam Hoa and Jiang Kam Tu stood before the prime minister. Concubine Chun said, "A thief came to cause trouble, but I have already had him executed." The prime minister glanced at them, then looked down. "Let's drop this matter. The sixth prince will be returning to the capital soon. The emperor has decreed a banquet to be held in the palace. Kam Hoa and Kam Tu will accompany me to the palace." The two sisters answered in unison, yes. In a certain room, a crowd had now gathered. The beautiful Jiang Kam Hoa stood in the crowd, and soon, two gossips behind her started talking. "What a country bumpkin. She's not even ashamed to go out. I really don't know what the fourth prince sees in her at all." Just then, a beautiful young lady walked over to "Oh, this must be the prime minister's legitimate daughter, Miss Jiang." It turned out to be Chenlin Nak. She crossed her arms and said, "You've really made this young lady see you in a new light." Jiang Kam Tu glanced at Jiang Kam Hoa. "Older sister, this is the daughter of the vice minister of revenue, and also the grandniece of the noble consort. You're always at home, so you probably don't know." Jiang Kam Hoa looked towards Chenlin Nak. "So it's Miss Chun. My apologies for the discourtesy." Chenlin Nak dusted off her sleeve. "Ignorance is no crime. There have been gatherings before, but not just anyone is qualified to attend." After hearing this, Jiang Kam Hoa paused. "She's hostile towards me." She glanced at Chenlin Nak's innocent-looking face. At the same time, a handsome young man walked in. Jiang Kam Hoa thought to herself, "So she has her eyes on my two-faced fiancé." She smiled and spoke up. "Kam Hoa is passionate about medicine, so I've often declined to attend boring gatherings in the past." Chenlin Nak's mouth fell open. "Just a poison girl, yet she dares to look down on our banquets." She was angry. "I've heard of the eldest Miss Jiang's reputation as a poison girl before, but now it seems her tongue is just as venomous." Chenlin Nak's father saw this and interjected, "Lin Nak, don't speak nonsense. The eldest Miss Jiang is a divine maiden famous throughout the capital." Chenlin Nak paid no mind and turned her head away. "What divine maiden? It sounds like she's just hyping herself up." At all. Her father felt embarrassed and said to the fourth prince, "This child has been spoiled rotten by me." The fourth prince covered his laugh. The fourth prince replied, "It's all right." At this moment, Jiang Kam Hoa thought to herself, he won't even step in to help his own fiancée out of a predicament. Suddenly, Chenlin Nak pointed her hand towards Jiang Kam Hoa that I, on the contrary, would like to see which fool believes you are a divine maiden. Jiang Kam Hoa stood frozen when suddenly a voice rang out. "This prince believes it." "What? Ganam Kung Wan Gein." "The sixth prince has arrived." Jiang Kam Hoa was stunned when she saw him. "It's him again?" Nam Kwang gestured for her to be quiet, as if they didn't know each other. The sixth prince of the Great Chun Kingdom, the only legitimate son of the late Empress, Nam Kwang. The Empress died early. He was personally raised by the Empress Dowager, proficient in both literary and martial arts. At 14, he went to the border to fight enemies, achieving glorious military merits, and is the most advantageous person in the competition for the position of Crown Prince. Jiang Kam Hoa lowered her head, her face sad that I didn't think the person I saved would be him. Her hand trembled. The matter of the divine maiden and the matter with concubine Chun, he knows everything. I don't know if he's ultimately a friend or a foe. Jiang Kam Hoa and Chen Lin Nok both bowed. In greeting, Nam Kwang smiled faintly. Chen Lin Nok glanced at him, and Nam Kwang looked back at her. Then he asked, "Who was it that was questioning just now?" He approached Chen Lin Nok. Chen Lin Nok's face was downcast, not daring to look up. A few seconds later, she looked up. S6 Prince, it was me. Nam Kwang then said, "This prince trusts Miss Jiang. Does Miss Chen also think this prince is a fool?" Chen Lin Nok bowed and knelt. I dare not. I dare not. Nam Kwang glanced at Nam Khan. Imperial brother, you also witnessed Miss Jiang's aura. Do you feel they were talking nonsense? Nonsense. Vice Minister Chun then bowed his head to apologize. Sixth Prince, please forgive us. It was my daughter who spoke foolishly. She absolutely had no intention of offending. Nam Kwang frowned. Vice Minister Chun, it is not a good thing for you to let your daughter speak so recklessly. A good thing. He turned around. All of you rise. The kneeling crowd slowly got up. Jiang Kam Hoa was bewildered by Nam Kwang's actions. She gazed at his back. Standing up for me? Just then, Nam Kwang glanced at her, making her blush in embarrassment that I must be overthinking it. He's probably just protecting the dignity of the royal family. Jiang Kam too stood behind Jiang Kam Hoa, glaring at her older sister. Jiang Kam Hoa, you brought this upon yourself. At this time in the imperial palace, the Empress Dowager raised her wine cup with a sinister look in her eyes. This wine has a good flavor. Reward the daughters of Prime Minister Jiang with a taste. Yes. As soon as the words were spoken, two servant girls brought the wine before Jiang Kam Hoa and Jiang Kam too. The two sisters clasped their hands and said in unison, "Thank you, Empress Dowager, for the reward." The Empress Dowager glanced at Jiang Kam Hoa's attire, and surprised, she asked, "Kam Hoa, why are you wearing white clothes?" Jiang Kam Hoa stammered. Just then, Jiang Kam too interjected. Your Majesty, the Empress Dowager. Mother had prepared a set of fine clothes for older sister, but she refused to accept them, preferring to wear commoners' clothes instead. Therefore, the Prime Minister spoke up to her, "Be quiet. Wearing commoners' clothes to a palace banquet is too disrespectful to the royal family. To frame me, she doesn't even care about the reputation of the Prime Minister's manner at all." Nam Kwang clapped a few times and spoke up. I have long heard that Prime Minister Jiang is upright and honest. Now seeing how frugal Miss Jiang is, I know those words are not wrong. Jiang Kam Hoa looked at Nam Kwang. She hesitated and turned her head away. Then she bowed her head and reported, I heard from my father in the manner that the war on the border is incessant. The people are suffering in misery. As she spoke, she bowed her head low to the ground. I am willing to wear simple clothes and donate my fine garments to the people on the border. I beg your Majesty the Emperor and your Majesty the Empress Dowager for forgiveness. The Emperor smiled upon seeing this. Good, good. The Prime Minister is indeed a pillar of the nation. To have raised a daughter who understands propriety so well, worthy of being my imperial sister's daughter. The Prime Minister bowed his head and replied, Your Majesty is too kind. The beautiful Jiang Kam Hoa smiled lightly. Jiang Kam too, at this moment, could only think angrily. Damn it, even this couldn't make things difficult for her. Nam Kwang slowly poured a cup of wine, held it in his hand, and glanced towards Jiang Kam Hoa. Jiang Kam Hoa's eyes widened in astonishment. The servant girls were stunned and began to gossip. The cold sixth prince actually smiled. Jiang Kam Hoa felt a sense of joy in her heart. She held her wine cup, closed her eyes tightly, and smiled faintly. The two looked at each other affectionately, then raised their cups together. On the other side, Nam Khan was furious upon witnessing this. On a beautiful day, Noyet Lin and Jiang Kam Hoa were happily strolling by the riverbank. Noyet Lin smiled until her eyes crinkled. The weather is so nice today, perfect for a walk. Jiang Kam Hoa agreed. That's right. Nam Khan also appeared, leaving Noyet Lin bewildered. It would have been even more perfect without him. The three of them walked towards the boat by the river. Kinam Khan said cheerfully, Kamhoa, I've had people make preparations so you can enjoy the outing today. No one will come to disturb us. John Kamhoa thought blankly. This just makes me even less happy. Suddenly, a voice rang out. Isn't this fourth brother? John Kamhoa turned her head, and it turned out to be Kanam Kwong approaching with two attendants. Fourth brother, you've prepared so well. Why not invite your brother along? Or could it be that? Kanam Kwong approached Kanam Khan with a cunning look in his eyes. Is fourth brother not welcoming me? Kanam Khan was angry, but still forced a stiff smile. How could that be? It's just that the boat is so small, sixth brother wouldn't. Kanam Kwong instructed Datan. Datan, you and Noyet Lin wait for us on the shore. Datan replied yes. After speaking, Kanam Kwong stepped forward. He extended his hand to help John Kamhoa. Come on up. John Kamhoa stared blankly at his hand, and then closed her eyes tightly, smiling to herself. Immediately, Kanam Kwong took her hands and pulled her up. Kanam Khan was vexed watching this. Sixth brother. Kanam Kwong chuckled. Fourth brother, do you want to hold my hand too? Kanam Khan's face turned pale. No need. A while later, the boat had traveled some distance. Kanam Khan took out a jade pendant and gave it to John Kamhoa. I've worn this jade pendant since I was a child. Consider it a protective talisman. I noticed you don't have a suitable jade pendant with you, so I'm giving it to you. John Kamhoa was stunned. It's not that I don't have a jade pendant. She recalled the old jade pendant, a top-quality blood jade. I'll just consider it as payment for my medicine, but unfortunately, I've already sold it. Kinam Kwong, sitting beside her, seemed displeased. Kinam Khan spoke again. Consider this jade a token of our engagement. Anger was now clearly visible in Kinam Kwong's eyes as the boat passed through an area of lotus flowers. Kinam Kwong glanced over. Then he dropped a tied piece of cloth onto a blooming lotus bud. Datan saw this, and his face turned pale with alarm. It was a message left by the sixth prince. A boat was now tailing John Kamhoa's boat. Datan tore the cloth from the lotus bud. Kinam Kwong had left a message. Act now. The small boat drifted across the lake. On both banks were lotus flowers waiting to bloom. John Kamhoa reached out to touch a lotus flower, when suddenly the boat lurched, startling both her and Kinam Khan. The boatman then shouted, "We're in trouble. The boat is broken." River water immediately flooded into the boat. Water poured in. John Kamhoa thought worriedly, "We're in the middle of the lake. What if I fall in?" Her large, round eyes were filled with bewilderment. Kinam Kwong quickly swept her into his arms and said with amusement, "Fourth brother, next time you want to take a beauty out on the lake, you should prepare a better boat. Don't let the beauty fall into the water." Kinam Khan gritted his teeth in anger. Then he slipped and fell right into the lake with a splash. Kinam Khan yelled, "Kinam Kwong, you!" Kinam Kwong smirked, while John Kamhoa blushed in embarrassment. Kinam Kwong quickly carried her towards the shore. John Kamhoa was breathing heavily. She glanced at Kinam Kwong and thought to herself, I really want to hit him. Kinam Kwong then spoke, looking at this prince like that. Have you forgotten that I am your ally? John Kamhoa replied, Sixth Prince, what do you wish to gain by choosing to cooperate with me? Kinam Kwong waved his hand. Don't worry, this prince is not your enemy. John Kamhoa slowly lowered her head. So, can I understand that the sixth prince is willing to help me keep my secret? Kinam Kwong's expression changed. Keeping a secret is not difficult. He glanced at her. However, it turned out he was looking at the red jade pendant in John Kamhoa's hand. John Kamhoa held the jade pendant and said, This is just a verbal engagement. The sixth prince need not worry. I will absolutely not marry the fourth prince, and the prime minister's manor will not support him. Kinam Kwong was stunned. Then he smiled. Next, John Kamhoa was stunned. She looked at the jade pendant in her palm and replied to Kinam Kwong, Didn't I already sell this? Kinam Kwong stood up. He approached her. John Kamhoa's eyes widened. How could it be? Kinam Kwong lifted her chin, then leaned in close. The thing I gave you. Just you dare try to sell it again. Kinam Kwong lifted John Kamhoa's chin. She smirked and pinched Kinam Kwong's cheek back. Sixth Prince, I've discovered you really like pinching other people's faces. She just kept pinching his cheek. John Kamhoa then turned her head. How does it feel to be pinched back? Let's see if you dare do that to me again next time. In that moment, Kinam Kwong's heart pounded. He placed a hand on his chest, but couldn't control it. Then Kinam Kwong was dazed. John Kamhoa spoke up. Why hasn't our boat arrived yet? It's so slow. Kinam Kwong then moved his hand on his back just then. As Datan rowed the boat closer, he saw the secret signal. Don't come closer. What does His Highness want to do now? Outside the Zhang Manor, a carriage stopped. Eunuch Lee ran in to report to Prime Minister Zhang. Eunuch Lee, you are here because? Eunuch Lee gently wiped the sweat from his face. A plague has suddenly broken out in the palace. The Empress Dowager is ill, summoning Miss Zhang to the palace to treat her. Prime Minister Zhang was stunned. Well, my daughter went boating on the lake with the fourth prince today. She hasn't returned yet. Eunuch Lee's face turned pale upon hearing this. Suddenly there was a call. Eunuch, Zhang Cam2 approached and bowed her head. Father, Cam2 has also studied some medical arts. Why not let me go to the palace and try? Eunuch Lee quickly replied, then second miss, please come to the palace with me. Zhang Cam2, as if her wish had been granted, bowed her head. Yes. With that, the two left immediately. As Zhang Cam2 walked out, the concubine took Prime Minister Zhang's arm. Cam-ho has run off somewhere. If Cam2 hadn't gone just now, the palace would likely have held us accountable. Just then, Zhang Cam-ho walked in. She said with a bright smile, Father, I'm back. Prime Minister Zhang, taking his anger out on her, yelled, You still know how to come back? Zhang Cam-hoa asked worriedly, Did something happen? Concubine Shin frowned. The Empress Dowager is ill and summoned you to the palace to treat her. All you know is how to go out and play. Zhang Cam-hoa was extremely alarmed upon hearing this news. Imperial grandmother is sick. With that, she turned to leave. Then I'll go to the palace immediately. Concubine Shin's face paled as she thought, no, if she goes to the palace, she'll steal Cam2's spotlight. She quickly resorted to her tricks. Master, Cam2 studied under the Saint of Medicine for many years. She'll be fine. But Cam-hoa has only practiced poison making all these years. What if she can't cure her? Prime Minister Zhang thought in silence, then suddenly shouted, Stop right there. Zhang Cam-hoa turned her head in bewilderment. Prime Minister Zhang then said, You will stay home and reflect on your actions. No need to bring disaster upon our family. After speaking, Prime Minister Zhang and concubine Shin turned and went inside. A moment later on the veranda, an angry Noyet Lin followed behind Zhang Cam-hoa. The master used to be so proud of you, young miss, but now that the second concubine has been bad-mouthing you in his ear, he's turned against you. Zhang Cam-hoa thought to herself, Concubine Shin currently holds all the power, which is not good for me. I must find a chance to bring her down. Zhang Cam-hoa glanced at the maidservant standing outside the door. Isn't that the person she arranged to Moni? Tormi? She smirked. Inside the room, various herbs were on the table. Zhang Cam-hoa picked up a bag. I'm still missing the Tiani herb. It only grows in cold places like the Northwest, and I can't find it. I'll have to think of another way tomorrow. While Zhang Cam-hoa was deep in thought, someone was watching her from outside. It turned out to be Kanam Kwang, who smirked upon learning of her situation. The next day, at the Zhang Manor, little birds were chirping merrily. In her room, Zhang Cam-hoa was sound asleep. She slowly sat up, then put on her clothes. What's that? She opened the box, and inside appeared a small sprig of an herb. Zhang Cam-hoa stared blankly at the paper in her hand. Isn't this the Tiani herb? I've given you what you wanted. Where's the antidote you promised me? After reading the note, Zhang Cam-hoa smiled faintly. She picked up a bag of herbs, looked outside, where beautiful petals were gently falling. A bag of herbs was hung on a tree branch. At the imperial palace, Kanam Kwang held the bag of herbs. He opened it, but it turned out to be a round pill. Kanam Kwang held the note written by Zhang Cam-hoa. If you dare sneak into my place again, I'll poison you. Kanam Kwang smiled as he read. He turned his head and said to Datan, By the way, how are things at the Prime Minister's manor recently? Datan replied, The eldest Miss Zhang invited a physician over today. Kanam Kwang, holding the small bag, asked, She's sick? That's right, at the Prime Minister Zhang's manor. Zhang Cam-hoa spoke. Cam-hoa felt unwell upon getting out of bed today. There is also a plague in the imperial city right now. I think we should invite a physician to examine every one in the manor. Prime Minister Zhang was silent, then waved his hand. Then you can invite physician Zhao from the east side. Yes. After saying that, Zhang Cam-hoa walked out of the room. Outside, Zhang Cam-hoa asked Noyet Lin, Is the concubine still using the incense today? Noyet Lin replied, Yes, she is. Noyet Lin suddenly became angry. Zhang Cam-hoa then said, As long as it's useful to me, that's all that matters. A moment later in the room, Zhang Cam-hoa slowly took something out of her pouch. Ta Ni, you work diligently in the No-hoa courtyard. I like you very much. She placed the sachet on Ta Ni's hand. Here, this sachet is a reward for you. Ta Ni received it with both hands and said with a smile, Thank you, young Mississippi. Zhang Cam-hoa rested her chin on her hand and said, It just so happens that father has invited a doctor to examine everyone everyone in the residence today. Help me inform the concubine. Yes. Following Jiang Cam Hoa's words, Tani quickly reported to concubine Tran. She said, Dr. True has always been upright and won't be bribed. What is that bitch scheming now? Tani lowered her head. There's an epidemic in the capital recently. Perhaps he was just invited for a routine checkup. Concubine Tran turned around. All right, you may leave. The incense today is a bit strange. My head hurts so much. At this moment, Jiang Cam Hoa was happily watering the flowers when Noyet Lin approached. Young miss, you even deliberately informed that old hag. Jiang Cam Hoa said with a cunning look, Noyet Lin, what do you guess will happen when the concubine's incense is mixed with Tien grass? As Jiang Cam Hoa and Noyet Lin were talking, Tan Ni suddenly approached. Eldest young miss, Dr. True has arrived. The master is summoning you. Jiang Cam Hoa turned and called, Noyet Lin, let's go. Yes. Outside the room, Jiang Cam Hoa and Noyet Lin walked over. Dr. True. Concubine Tran said, rubbing her head, I've been feeling dizzy lately. Please examine me quickly. Dr. True took her pulse, and in an instant, he became alarmed. This is... Prime Minister Jiang asked, is my wife seriously ill? Dr. True stammered, Madam. He bowed his head, trembling. Madam has contracted a venereal disease. After hearing this, Prime Minister Jiang furiously shouted, speak. Just then, Jiang Cam Hoa opened the door and entered. Nonsense, she said with a stern face. My Jiang family has always maintained its purity. Moreover, while father was away providing disaster relief, the concubine stayed home and remained chaste. How could she contract such a disease? Prime Minister Jiang pointed and cursed at Dr. True. Quack spouting nonsense. Men, beat him for me. Two maids whispered, wasn't there a man in concubine Tran's room before? Hey, don't speak nonsense. Prime Minister Jiang's face turned pale. The maids bowed their heads in fear. He roared, damn you, you dare to lie to me that there was an assassin. Concubine Tran said worriedly, Master, this is a great injustice. Someone must have framed me. It was you. Concubine Tran pointed directly at Jiang Cam Hoa's face that you're dissatisfied with me, and Cam too. You burned down my courtyard, and now you're framing me. Jiang Cam Hoa covered her mouth with her hand. Concubine, why would you say such a thing? It's just that the assassin was already executed by you. Otherwise, I would have confronted him. She continued with amusement. I wonder where that assassin came from. Now, there's no one to testify. Prime Minister Jiang suddenly paused. He ordered, men, go to the assassin's house and investigate. For me, the time it takes for an incense stick to burn past, and a servant ran in to report. Master, this was found in the assassin's house. A green jade pendant. This belongs to concubine Tran. Prime Minister Jiang was furious. Dragged this adulteress to the lakeside. Concubine Tran fell to the ground. Jiang Cam Hoa closed her eyes and thought to herself, Concubine Tran, you were the one who framed me first. Suddenly, a voice rang out. An imperial edict has arrived. Jiang Cam Hoa turned her head in a daze. A eunuch from the palace entered to deliver the edict, an oral decree from His Majesty the Emperor. Miss Jiang Cam, too, has successfully created a medicine. She is rewarded with 2 bolts of brocade silk and a chest of jewels. The Prime Minister and everyone in the residence knelt down in unison that we thank His Majesty for His grace. Jiang Cam Hoa frowned deeply. She didn't expect the Emperor to favor Jiang Cam, too, so much. Concubine Tran grabbed the Prime Minister's sleeve. Master, she frowned and pleaded, for Cam Tu's sake, please spare me. The Prime Minister was stunned, his face grim as he said, let go. Men, the second madam has gone mad. Take her to the village estate to recuperate. As Concubine Tran was dragged away by the servants, she burst into tears and screamed, Master, get out. She angrily shoved the servant's hand away. Let me go. Eunuch Lai glanced at the Prime Minister. Jiang Cam Hoa sighed. Well, that's fine too. At least she's been driven out of the Jiang residence. Elsewhere, Jiang Cam Hoa poured herself a cup of tea and drank it. She was suddenly startled. Kin Nam Kwang was sitting by the window, smiling at her. This time, I knocked before entering. Jiang Cam Hoa looked at him with a grim face. You call coming through the window entering? Kin Nam Kwang walked closer to her and said with a smile, Your methods today were brilliant. However, this prince is curious. How did you make concubine Tran contract a venereal disease? He moved forward and embraced her. Jiang Kam Hoa glanced at him. Thank you for your praise, sixth prince. The concubine often uses a specially made incense. This type only needs to come into contact with a little Tien grass to cause a venereal disease. Her hands trembled slightly. Moreover, the clothes that your highness left at that man's house could have eliminated her in one go. What a pity. Kinam Kwong took a small pouch from his clothes. That little sister of yours is no pushover. As soon as she entered the palace, she started slandering you. He poured out an antidote pill. She said you are heartless and ungrateful, that while the Empress Dowager was ill, you were in the mood to go boating on the lake and didn't even enter the palace to visit her afterwards. Quite a few people believe her. What do you plan to do next? He then popped the antidote pill into his mouth and picked up her teacup to drink. Jiang Kam Hoa's face flushed red as she looked at him in a panic. That's the cup I just used. Isn't that an indirect? She rushed forward to stop him. Don't. The teacup unfortunately spilled on Kinam Kwong. Da-da. Jiang Kam Hoa was stunned, fumbling as she looked at him. Huh? What's wrong? She hurriedly pulled open Kinam Kwong's robe, looking at the red mark on his chest. His cheeks and neck flushed red. The two of them stared into each other's eyes, their hearts pounding uncontrollably. In the small room, Noyet Lin's voice suddenly sounded from outside. Young miss. Noyet Lin opened the door, walked in, and said with a smile. Noyet Lin heard a commotion. Is there something wrong? What? Seeing Jiang Kam Hoa and Kinam Kwong on the floor with their clothes in disarray, Noyet Lin's cheeks flushed bright red. I'm interrupting. After saying that, Noyet Lin quickly ran out and closed the door. Jiang Kam Hoa looked at Kinam Kwong in embarrassment and explained it's not what she thinks. Kinam Kwong adjusted his clothes and looked at her with a smile. Miss Jiang, this is the second time you've stripped my clothes off. Jiang Kam Hoa was so embarrassed her face was red enough to steam. Both times were treat your injuries. If you're fine now, then go. Kinam Kwong let out a soft laugh. Then I'll be going. That's right. Your sister is causing such a stir in the palace. Do you need my help? Jiang Kam Hoa smiled and refused. No need. I'll enter the palace tomorrow to deal with her. Then I'll be watching closely. After saying that, he jumped out. At this moment, Noyet Lin opened the door and peeked her head in to look at her. Young miss, Noyet Lin thinks the sixth prince is very nice. Jiang Kam Hoa, embarrassed, quickly shouted, no, don't talk nonsense. Also, remember to keep what happened today a secret. Noyet Lin smiled at her. Noyet Lin will definitely not say a word. Jiang Kam Hoa then said, I still have to enter the palace tomorrow, so I should go to bed a little earlier. In the imperial palace, Jiang Kam Hoa followed a eunuch inside. Seeing a dirty corner by the wall, she was startled. Oh, there's a place like this in the palace. The eunuch glanced over and said, Miss Jiang, this is where the servants eat. It's very unclean. A palace maid walking behind them suddenly started coughing continuously. Jiang Kam Hoa glanced at her. The palace maid coughed continuously, her eyes listless, and the food box in her hand fell to the ground, spilling the vegetables from the small box. Eunuch Lai shouted angrily, Bold servant, you've bumped into a noble person. The palace maid, frightened, quickly knelt on the ground. This servant deserves death. Jiang Kam Hoa glanced at the food box. She crouched down and picked up some food to examine it. The palace maid hurriedly stopped her. Miss Jiang, don't. It's very dirty. Jiang Kam Hoa glanced at the palace maid, then grabbed her hand to take her pulse. Her eyes narrowed. Jiang Kam Hoa stood up straight and looked at Eunuch Lai. Eunuch, please take me to the Two True Palace. Eunuch Lai looked at her and asked, is something wrong? Jiang Kam Hoa said seriously, the illness in the palace is not the waterborne plague. Jiang Kam too carried a pot of medicine up and said to the emperor, reporting to your majesty, the palace maids who took the medicine have recovered. The emperor said joyfully, this is good news. Then quickly bring it to the Empress Dowager to drink. Suddenly, Jiang Kam Hoa walked over and shouted, wait. She looked at Jiang Kam Tu and asked, Kam Tu, is the medicine you're using to treat the waterborne plague an antidote? Jiang Kam Tu frowned and feigned, sister, I know you want to save the Empress Dowager, but the situation is urgent. Now is not the time to fight for credit, is it? Hearing this, The emperor's face darkened. Jiang Kam Hoa knelt on the ground and said seriously, "Your subject is not fighting for credit, nor am I here to cause trouble. The illness the palace staff have is not the waterborne plague. If this medicine is used rashly, it will lead to them vomiting blood." Jiang Kam too looked at her coldly. "That I have studied medicine under the Saint of Medicine for many years, while if I recall correctly, you studied poisons. Are you trying to say your medical skills are superior to mine?" The emperor looked at her indifferently and said, "We trust Kam Tu's medical skills. You may take the medicine away." Jiang Kam Tu smiled smugly at her. Jiang Kam Hoa frowned and hurriedly grabbed Jiang Kam Tu's sleeve. "Your Majesty, your subject dares to guarantee with my life. Please wait a moment. Do not act recklessly." Jiang Kam Tu snatched her sleeve back and looked at her angrily. "The Empress Dowager is in critical condition. Any delay will endanger her life." The emperor said worriedly, "The Empress Dowager's safety cannot be delayed." Jiang Kam Hoa was stunned. "Your Majesty," a voice suddenly came from behind the door. "Father Emperor, this son believes that for the eldest miss to be so insistent, there must be a reason." Jiang Kam Hoa said with a determined gaze, "Reporting to your Majesty, I have discovered that the plague is not spreading from one hall to another, but from the palace staff to their masters. After inspecting the staff's kitchen, I found it to be filthy and messy. I suspect the palace staff contracted it from eating food with yeast fungus." Jiang Kam too was stunned. "What is yeast fungus? I've never heard of it." At this moment, Eunuch Li ran over in a panic. "Reporting to your Majesty, the palace maids and eunuchs who took the medicine are now vomiting blood." Jiang Kam too screamed in fear. "Impossible! That's not possible." Jiang Kam Hoa kowtowed and pleaded with the emperor again. "I beg your Majesty to grant me permission to enter the palace to diagnose the illness." The emperor looked at her and reminded her, "This disease is highly contagious. Once you enter, you cannot leave until the illness is cured." Jiang Kam Hoa nodded, her eyes firm. "I know, but I must confirm the source to be able to prescribe the right medicine." The emperor sighed and waved his hand. "Very well, take your younger sister with you. Let her learn something. If you can't cure it, then don't come out either." Two palace maids standing outside the door opened the door to the other room. Jiang Kam Hoa stared in shock at the room before her. Nam Quang stood inside, smiling at her. Jiang Kam Hoa stepped into that room. Nam Quang smiled at her. "You're here." Jiang Kam Hoa looked at him, stunned and surprised. She rushed forward and grabbed him by the collar. "Sixth Prince, why are you here? Don't you know this is the epicenter of the plague?" Nam Quang teased. "Are you concerned about me?" Jiang Kam Hoa nodded and replied, "Of course. As a doctor, I am concerned about everyone in the palace, and the Sixth Prince is no exception." Nam Quang looked at her with a gentle smile. "Imperial grandmother raised me. Now that she is ill, I must be present." Also, he gripped her wrist tightly, looking at the room inside. "If I were to get sick, you would cure me too, right?" Jiang Kam Hoa's face flushed red. She shyly buried her face in his chest. We should go quickly. The Empress Dowager is still waiting." Jiang Kam Hoa quickly pulled her hand back, turned, and ran. Nam Quang grabbed her hand, not letting go, and led her inside. "Let's go." Jiang Kam Hoa sat by the bed to check the condition of the Empress Dowager. This is indeed not smallpox. It's an infectious disease caused by yeast fungus. The prescription is actually not difficult. What's more important is, Jiang Kam Hoa stood up and said seriously, "Everyone come to the front hall. I will diagnose each person one by one." Late at night, in a dark room, the door was opened. Nam Kung Wan Gin and saw Jiang Kam Hoa exhaustedly slumped over the table. Nam Quang walked over, took off his outer robe, and draped it over her. "You take such good care of others." His eyes were full of concern as he looked at her. "But you don't know how to take care of yourself." Nam Quang sat in the room, picking up and reading the papers Jiang Kam Hoa had written on. Jiang Kam Hoa sat opposite him, slumped over the table, sleeping soundly, a faint fragrance in the air. Lying on the table, Jiang Kam Hoa slowly opened her eyes. Nam Quang smiled at her. "You're awake." He reached out, intending to take her hand. Jiang Kam Hoa shot up, rubbing her eyes. "Why didn't you wake me when you arrived? Is there something you need me for?" Nam Quang lightly touched the lamp on the table and then reached out to caress her cheek. Jiang Kam Hoa's cheeks flushed red as she looked at him, bewildered. Nam Quang pulled his hand back and said softly, "If you're tired, go to sleep. Don't mind me." Jiang Kam Hoa shyly rubbed her head. I have an item to make examinations more convenient. I've already drawn a picture of it. Kin Nam Kwang folded the paper and replied, I've seen this item. I'll have someone make it for you. For now, go to sleep. He stood up, turned to leave, and added, surely, you don't need my help to go to sleep, do you? Jiang Kam Hoa's face flushed bright red. She pushed him out and threw his outer robe out as well. I don't need it. At the Empress Dowager's palace, a palace maid stood guard outside. Jiang Kam Hoa was rechecking the Empress Dowager's health. The door opened. Kin Nam Kwang walked in holding an object and said to her, the item is finished. He looked at Jiang Kam Hoa curiously and asked, but how do you use this thing? Jiang Kam Hoa took it and placed one end on his chest. Kin Nam Kwang's heart began to race, his face flushing red. Jiang Kam Hoa was a little surprised. Your heart is beating a bit fast. She touched her own forehead, then touched Kin Nam's forehead. You wore so little last night. Did you catch a cold? Open your mouth. Jiang Kam Hoa then popped a pill into Kin Nam Kwang's mouth and closed it for him. After doing so, Jiang Kam Hoa turned to go back inside, waving her hand at him and reminding him, go back and get some rest. Jia Qing, standing nearby, stared with his mouth agape as Kin Nam Kwang obediently took the medicine. Then he looked at Jiang Kam Hoa sitting by the Empress Dowager's bed, his eyes shining brightly, so impressive. She can make His Highness, who detests coptis root, actually eat it. Jiang Kam Hoa put the stethoscope in her ears. She placed the other end on the Empress Dowager's chest, and she suddenly became overjoyed. This is wonderful. Imperial grandmother's illness is no longer a problem. At this moment, the Empress Dowager also opened her eyes, looking at her in surprise and calling out, Kam Hoa, help me sit up. Jiang Kam Hoa carefully helped the Empress Dowager sit up. Grandmother, take it slow. The Empress Dowager looked at her, moved and pained. It's been hard on you these past few days. The Empress Dowager gently caressed her cheek. Just then, the sound of hurried footsteps was heard. Kin Nam Kwang ran in frantically, looking at the Empress Dowager with surprised joy. Imperial grandmother, you're awake. He rushed to the bedside, looking at the Empress Dowager with concern. Are you uncomfortable anywhere? The Empress Dowager smiled kindly at him. Old Sixth, why are you here? She looked behind Kin Nam Kwang and asked, did you come with your imperial brothers to pay respects to me? Not wanting to see the Empress Dowager sad, Kin Nam Kwang tactfully replied, since Zhu Palace was sealed, Father Emperor and my imperial brothers have been too busy to come. Only I could make it. The Empress Dowager lowered her head in disappointment. I see. I'm a little tired. You two may leave. Seeing the Empress Dowager so sad, Jiang Kam Hoa couldn't bear it and said gently, Grandmother, in a few days when the weather is better, I will take you for a walk outside. The Empress Dowager smiled and hummed in agreement. Watching Kin Nam Kwang and Jiang Kam Hoa leave, the Empress Dowager let out a soft sigh. These two children are such a good match. If only Kam Hoa hadn't been betrothed to Old Fourth so early. Outside the main hall, two palace maids sweeping outside the sleeping quarters were whispering that I heard the Empress Dowager has woken up. Already, was it eldest Miss Jiang who cured her? The maid next to her nodded and replied, that's right. Tell me, they're from the same family. How can they be so different? Indeed, she's truly worthy of being the eldest Miss Jiang. The Empress Dowager can already walk in the garden today. Perhaps the quarantine on Zhu Palace will be lifted soon. Jiang Kam, too, hiding in a corner, was so angry her face twisted with rage. I don't believe it. It's impossible. She angrily threw the door open. The two palace maids outside jumped in fright, looking at her furious expression. Jiang Kam Tu's face darkened, full of resentment. How could her medical skills be better than mine? In a small grove, Kin Nam Kwang and Jiang Kam Hoa were helping the Empress Dowager take a walk. The Empress Dowager smiled with contentment and happiness, looking at the two of them. Jiang Kam Tu, hiding to one side, gritted her teeth in anger. Kin Nam Kwang looked around warily, suddenly sensing a murderous aura, but saw that it was empty with no one around. Kin Nam Kwang sighed and rubbed his head. I must be overthinking things. Meanwhile, Eunuch Li held an imperial edict and announced a verbal edict from the emperor. The plague has been suppressed. The gates of Zhu Palace may be opened starting today. The palace maids looked at each other joyfully, smiling happily. The gates are open. This is wonderful. Elsewhere, Jiang Kam Tu, wearing a cloak that concealed her, had a ferocious expression. I can't just sit here and wait to die. In Consort Chen's palace, Jiang Kam Tu knelt on the floor, looking up at Consort Chen, who was reclining on a chair, and reported, Jiang Kam Hoa and the sixth prince are in love with each other. She has no regard for the fourth prince's dignity. The fourth prince and I are mutually in love. I hope your highness will grant our wish. Consort Shin placed a hand on a maid beside her and slowly sat up, speaking calmly. Who Connor likes, I have never interfered with. However, she stepped down and walked in front of Jiang Kam too, continuing coolly, Jiang Kam Hoa's future is now limitless. Marrying her will bring Connor one step closer to the throne. Consort Shin reached out, lifted her chin, and looked at her with a faint smile. Since you love Connor so much, you should help him. Am I right? Consort Shin straightened up, pulled a small vial of medicine from her sleeve, and gave it to Jiang Kam too. In a few days, at the sacred Thanksgiving banquet, you will apply this medicine to Jiang Kam Hoa's clothes. I will lead her to meet Connor. Once they are married, you can also enter the fourth prince's manor sooner. At that time, she won't be able to stop you and Connor. Jiang Kam too took the vial, frowning as she replied, yes. A while later, Jiang Kam Hoa and Eunuch Li had been waiting for some time when they saw Jiang Kam too slowly approaching. Eunuch Li looked at her and asked, what took you so long? You're delaying our departure from the palace. Jiang Kam too quickly explained, my stomach was feeling unwell just now. Let's hurry back to the manor. Jiang Kam Hoa looked at her in silence. Back at the Jiang manor, the small vial was opened. Jiang Kam too looked at the small box containing the set of clothes inside and picked up some of the powder. This spring wind is odorless and tasteless. Even with her superior medical skills, she won't be able to detect it. Just then, a voice called from outside, Second Mississippi. Jiang Kam too jumped, hastily closing the clothes box. Two maids entered, smiled at her, and reported, we are here to collect the items rewarded by the emperor. Jiang Kam too pretended to sit and read, a sinister glint in her eyes. The next day, while Jiang Kam Hoa was grinding something, Yuling came up from behind and opened the box. She looked in astonishment at the outfit inside. Miss, the emperor has rewarded you with silver brocade silk, a beautiful dress. Jiang Kam Hoa, while diligently grinding something, said nonchalantly, I'll wear this to the palace tomorrow to express my gratitude. Noyet Lin hugged the outfit and said with a happy smile, young miss will surely look very beautiful in it. The next day, Jiang Kam Hoa, dressed beautifully, went to the palace with Jiang Kam Tuesday, seeing the gorgeous and splendid Jiang Kam Hoa. Everyone around stared at her in astonishment. The eldest young lady of the Jiang family is so beautiful. Indeed, a kind-hearted beauty, and her fiancé is the fourth prince. Jiang Kam too's face darkened as she looked at her with anger and resentment. On what grounds? How could she be the fourth prince's primary wife? Suddenly, she noticed a man walking. But isn't that the deposed crown prince? Kanam Hien? Jiang Kam too's expression turned vicious. That I've changed my mind. If I ruin you, I'll be the only eldest young lady of the Jiang family. During the gratitude banquet, the Empress Dowager sat above, smiling kindly at Jiang Kam Hoa. Kam Hoa, you saved my life. Tell me whatever reward you desire. Jiang Kam Hoa smiled and replied, Kam Hoa only hopes for my maternal grandmother's good health. I ask for nothing else. The Empress Dowager laughed, happily looking at her. This child. The emperor, sitting beside her, gave a forced smile. He looked at Jiang Kam too and reprimanded her. Jiang Kam too, you misdiagnosed the illness and nearly harmed the Empress Dowager. You should know better. Jiang Kam Hoa raised her head and glanced at Jiang Kam too. Jiang Kam too hurriedly knelt and kowtowed to admit her guilt that I, your servant, know my crime is unforgivable. Although my medical skills are poor, my heart was set on saving the Empress Dowager. I vow to dedicate myself to studying medicine from now on. I beg your majesty to show mercy. The emperor didn't want to make things difficult for her either. Out of consideration for your sister's merit in saving a royal, I will spare you this time. Jiang Kam too hurriedly kowtowed in thanks. Thank you, your majesty, for your mercy. Behind her, Jiang Kam Hoa glanced at her. Thank you, your majesty, for your mercy. But inwardly, she was exploding with anger. No, we are not close at all. Please punish her quickly. Suddenly, a voice spoke up. Your majesty, I, your consort, cannot agree. Kam Hoa has performed a great service this time. How can there be no reward? Consort Tran looked at Jiang Kam Hoa and said gently, the Chu State's 100-flower purple honey, of which only 10 bottles are made each year, can preserve one's beauty. I, your consort, have a bottle. I will gift it to Kam Hoa as a reward. A small wine bottle was brought up. The emperor nodded in satisfaction and said, as expected of the mother of the groom-to-be, You are so thoughtful. Consort Tran smiled and replied, Your Majesty overpraises me. She looked at John Cam Hoa and said softly, Cam Hoa, why don't you have a taste? John Cam Hoa looked at the wine bottle being carried by the palace maid. The wine was poured. John Cam Hoa thought to herself, John Cam, too, hasn't touched this wine. Should I use a silver needle to test for poison? It should be fine. She then picked up the cup of wine and began to drink. The banquet was still underway. The Empress Dowager raised her cup, looked down below, and asked, Why is it a bit quiet today? Is someone not here? Consort Tran smiled at the Empress Dowager and replied, The first prince has reported ill. Connor is still busy with the affairs of the Ministry of Revenue. As for Kwong he must have been delayed by some matter. John Cam Hoa raised her cup and looked at the empty seat in front of her. Kin Nam Kwong isn't here yet? He didn't seem well last time I saw him. Could he be sick? She lightly touched her forehead. After all these busy days, even I'm a little tired. This feeling, something's not right. My limbs have no strength. Just then, John Cam too, who had appeared beside her at some point, said coldly, Reporting to Your Majesty the Empress Dowager, my sister seems to be drunk. Please allow me to take her to her room to rest. The Empress Dowager nodded in agreement. Go on. Watching John Cam too lead John Cam Hoa away, Consort Tran let out a faint smile, such a deep sisterly bond. As John Cam too helped John Cam Hoa away, she let out a cold laugh. Originally, I wanted to let you and the fourth prince seal the deal, but I know you don't like the fourth prince. So I changed it to a lover for you. Aren't you happy, sister? John Cam Hoa, completely drained of strength, was weak and said help. John Cam too angrily grabbed her tightly. Behave yourself. Let's go. The jade pendant on her waist fell to the ground. John Cam too quickly led John Cam Hoa away. A moment later, someone walked over. Seeing the jade pendant on the ground, Kin Nam Kwong bent down and picked it up. He stood up, frowning, and asked Datan, Does she dislike this prince that much? Datan looked at him blankly, not understanding what was happening. At this moment, someone approached from a distance. A eunuch was supporting the former crown prince, Kin Nam Hien. The eunuch said angrily, The second young lady of the Zhang family is truly rude, forcing you to come over while you are ill. Kin Nam Hien coughed a few times and said softly, It's not easy for me to meet people in the palace. To have a disciple of the saint of medicine willing to treat me is already an honor. Suddenly, he noticed someone nearby. Kin Nam Hien and Kin Nam Kwong's eyes met. Kin Nam Kwong stared intently in the direction Kin Nam Hien was heading. John Cam too is in this direction, the same direction as Cam Hoa. He gently touched the jade pendant in his hand, and a sense of unease suddenly arose. Something's not right. Kin Nam Kwong turned around and called out urgently, Eldest brother. Kin Nam Hien looked at him, confused. Kin Nam Kwong looked at him and said hurriedly, The second young Lady Zhang's medical skills are not refined. I'm afraid it will delay eldest brother's treatment. Your younger brother has heard that the eldest young Lady Zhang's miraculous healing hands have stabilized the plague in the palace. Why not let the eldest young Lady Zhang examine you, eldest brother? The eunuch standing beside Kin Nam Hien also urged him, Master, your health is more important. Let's go back. Kin Nam Hien looked troubled. Then, what about the second young Lady Zhang? Kin Nam Kwong smiled and said, As for the second young Lady Zhang, let your younger brother go and speak with her. Kin Nam Hien coughed a few times and then agreed. Well, all right then. Kin Nam Kwong watched Kin Nam Hien leave. He glanced at Datan and said coldly, Datan, let's go. After saying that, he ran quickly in one direction. John Cam too, you'd better not have done anything. He clenched the jade pendant in his hand. Otherwise, I will definitely not spare you. At this moment, John Cam Hoa was lying weakly on the bed. John Cam too stood to one side, looking at her with a vicious and sinister expression. When everyone sees you and Kin Nam Hien together, the fourth prince will no longer want you. Then the engagement will be mine. Sister, you are completely finished. Just as she was feeling smug, a cold voice rang out. Huh, is that so? Startled, John Cam too whipped her head around in fear. The door to the room was suddenly kicked open. Kin Nam Kwong walked in coldly, his sharp gaze like a blade fixed on John Cam too. Kin Nam Kwong walked in coldly. Seeing him, John Cam too's whole body suddenly stiffened, her face changing color. This is bad. Terrified, she tried to run out. Kin Nam Kwong glanced at her and quickly grabbed her by the shoulder. With his other hand, he grabbed John Cam too's wrist and pushed her. to the ground. Kin Nam Kwang looked at her with cold anger. So young, yet your heart is so vicious. Terrified, Jong Kam too quickly confessed everything. It was Her Highness the Consort who made me do it. At this moment, Jong Kam Hoa sat up from the bed and looked at her. You're lying. Why would Her Highness the Consort want to frame me with the first prince? Kin Nam Kwang pressed Jong Kam too down harder. Terrified, Jong Kam too quickly said, Her Highness the Consort wanted you and the fourth prince to seal the deal so that you two could marry sooner. Kin Nam Kwang frowned at her. But you wanted to destroy Kam Hoa's reputation, so you brought eldest brother into it. His face darkened. Kin Nam Kwang leaned down and whispered in her ear, Jong Kam too, I can't kill you, but I want you and fourth brother to go to hell together. After speaking, he straightened up and looked at Datan, standing beside him. Datan. Datan quickly replied, Your subordinate is here. Kin Nam Kwang pushed Jong Kam too towards him and ordered coldly, Throw this woman into fourth brother's room. Doesn't fourth brother want to seal the deal? I'll grant him his wish. After Datan led Jong Kam too away, Kin Nam Kwang turned around and sat down next to Jong Kam Hoa. Jong Kam Hoa smiled at him. You've saved me again, sixth prince. Kin Nam Kwang smiled at her and took the jade pendant from his chest. He carefully fastened it back on her waist. This time, it was more or less thanks to this that I was able to find you. Jong Kam Hoa took the jade pendant in surprise. She stared at the jade pendant in her hand, then smiled happily and said, Sixth prince, thank you. Seeing her innocent and beautiful smile, Kin Nam Kwang was stunned. He coughed lightly to hide his embarrassment. Let's go. I'll take you out. Jong Kam Hoa looked at him pitifully and hesitated. My limbs have no strength. Suddenly, a strong hand grasped her shoulder. Kin Nam Kwang smiled, picked her up in his arms, and left. Kin Nam Kwang, carrying Jong Kam Hoa, leaped away. He looked at her worriedly and asked, I don't know what she gave you to drink. Let me take you to a physician. Jong Kam Hoa replied thoughtfully, It wasn't something I drank. It's on the clothes. Kin Nam Kwang asked in surprise, What clothes? Jong Kam Hoa touched the outfit she was wearing and said softly, This is the only outfit she has touched. It must be some kind of drug. Seeing her hands start to move restlessly, Kin Nam Kwang's face flushed with embarrassment. Don't fidget. Jong Kam Hoa's face was flushed as she said uncomfortably, But I'm so hot. Her hands began to slip inside his robes. Kin Nam Kwang's heart couldn't help but pound. Jong Kam Hoa pulled open Kin Nam Kwang's robes. She pressed her face against his chest. Comfortable, like hugging a block of cool ice. Kin Nam Kwang was startled. He immediately lost his footing and fell into the water. There was a large whirlpool under the water. Kin Nam Kwang pulled Jong Kam Hoa's hand, and they surfaced. Are you more clear-headed now? Embarrassed, Jong Kam Hoa didn't dare to look him in the eye. Kin Nam Kwang, embarrassed, let go of her hand. Then you can go on your own. Jong Kam Hoa's face changed. Wait. She thrashed about in a panic. I can't swim. Kin Nam Kwang looked at her in astonishment. Jong Kam Hoa thrashed in a panic. She reached out and clung tightly to Kin Nam Kwang. Kin Nam Kwang's cheeks flushed red as he stared at her blankly. Jong Kam Hoa hugged him tightly, her small face flushed. What do we do now? A moment later, Kin Nam Kwang stepped onto the shore, with Jong Kam Hoa clinging to him with both her arms and legs. He didn't let go. Kin Nam Kwang carried her to one side, then gently took off his outer robe and draped it over her. In any case, change your clothes first. Jong Kam Hoa clutched the robe tightly and replied shyly. Kin Nam Kwang stood still on the spot, watching Jong Kam Hoa slowly walk away. His gaze was gentle and soft, his face flushing red. What am I to do with her now? He slapped his forehead helplessly. In the imperial palace, Kin Nam Kwang stood outside, looking at the small pouch in his hand and smiling foolishly. In the room, a maid was combing the hair of a beautiful woman. The beautiful woman, wearing a splendid blue dress, spoke in surprise. I didn't expect there to be a place like this in the palace. Her hair was combed and neatly tied up. The older maid, holding the comb, combed her hair again and replied, When the Empress first entered the palace, she lived here. The first time His Highness won a battle, he asked the Emperor to grant him this place. He brought all of the Empress's belongings here. The woman suddenly spoke up. That's enough. She took the maid's hand and stood up. His Highness must be getting impatient. The door to the room was opened. The beautifully dressed and made-up Jong Kam Hoa stepped out, looked at Nam Kwang and said, "Sorry to keep you waiting." Nam Kwang turned his head, his eyes wide with stunned surprise as he looked at her. He let out a soft, low chuckle. Seeing him laugh like that, John Cam Hoa, embarrassed and annoyed, snapped, "What are you laughing at?" Nam Kwang smiled gently at her and said softly, "It was my mother's dress. It looks very beautiful on you. Let's go. I'll take you to see the flowers." Meanwhile, at the banquet, Consort Chin supported the Empress Dowager and said with a smile, "The weather is so lovely today. This servant will accompany Your Majesty the Empress Dowager to see the flowers." The Empress Dowager nodded in agreement. With such fine weather, one should walk around more. Consort Chun and the Emperor strolled with the Empress Dowager in the rear garden to admire the flowers. A palace maid followed beside them, looking at the beautiful, blooming flowers before them. Consort Chun looked at the Empress Dowager and said with feigned concern, "I wonder what Connor is busy with. He didn't even come to the banquet today." The Emperor, who was beside them, chimed in. Jun recalls that old fourth's room is nearby. Let's go and have a look. A moment later, the group arrived in front of Nam Khan's room. Seeing the tightly shut door, the Emperor said in surprise, "In broad daylight, why is the door closed? Surely old fourth isn't still sleeping? Go wake him up." Consort Chin shot a meaningful glance at the palace maid beside her. The palace maid, understanding the signal, stepped forward and opened the door. Inside the room, clothes were strewn messily on the floor. From within, the coquettish voices of a man and a woman could be heard. "Don't. The Empress Dowager frowned deeply and asked unhappily, "What is going on here?" That palace made feigned difficulty and reported, "This servant seems to have seen the eldest Miss Jiang." Consort Chun gave a sinister, triumphant smile, her plan having succeeded. She pretended to ask, "Didn't Cam Hoa get drunk and go back to rest? Why is she here?" The palace maid, understanding her cue, replied, This servant saw that eldest Miss Jiang's clothes are also in the room." Consort Chun pretended to cover her face and began her dramatic performance. "Connor has always been so prudent. How could this happen? He must have been drugged by someone." The Emperor and the others stepped inside. He spoke up, "Although Jiang Cam Hoa has made great contributions, to think that she would do this kind of thing." The Empress Dowager shouted angrily, "My Cam Hoa would absolutely not do such a despicable thing." Consort Chin smiled at her. "Young people don't know restraint. It's possible for them to make a mistake in the heat of the moment. Although there is an engagement, she has lost her purity before marriage. It would be better to let them marry soon." The Emperor snorted coldly in anger. Word of today's events must not get out. Suddenly, a voice came from outside. "Get married?" Jiang Cam Hoa and Nam Kwang walked in, looking at everyone in surprise, and asked, "Who does the fourth prince want to marry?" The Emperor looked at her, stunned and bewildered, watching as Jiang Cam Hoa approached in a beautiful blue dress. The Emperor unconsciously reached out his hand. "Empress." Suddenly, a hand from behind pulled Jiang Cam Hoa back by the shoulder. Nam Kwang stepped forward, bowed to the Emperor, and said, "Your son greets Father Emperor. I was not aware that Father Emperor was here. Please forgive me." Seeing her there, Consort Chin's jaw dropped in astonishment. "Jiang Cam Hoa. How are you here?" Jiang Cam Hoa, pretending not to understand what was happening, looked at her and reporting to Your Highness Consort. After this subject woke up, I found no one beside me. While looking for my younger sister, I slipped and fell into the lake. If it weren't for the sixth prince's help, I'm afraid I would have drowned. The sixth prince took this subject to change into a different set of clothes. Consort Chun was as stunned as if struck by lightning from a clear sky. The Emperor's face darkened as he roared in anger. "Guards, drag the people inside the room out here for Jun." Consort Chin's face changed color. "No." Nam Khan and Jiang Cam too were dragged out. Everyone around looked at the two in astonishment. "It's the fourth prince and the second Miss Jiang." Consort Chin hurriedly grabbed the Emperor's hand and pleaded, "Your Majesty, there must be a misunderstanding." The Empress Dowager angrily glared at the nearby palace maid. "A misunderstanding? You nearly ruined Cam Hoa's reputation. Are you servants all blind? Spouting nonsense is a capital offense." That palace maid trembled with fear. Jiang Kim Hoa looked at the two on the ground and said, "My fiancée and my second sister together. I really don't know how to explain to Father how this happened." Kin Nam Kwang, standing beside her, said with feigned thoughtfulness. The consort just said that a woman who has lost her purity should marry soon. Fourth brother must take responsibility for the second Miss Jiang. Consort Chun was stunned, furious enough to burst that Connor is not in his right mind right now. He was clearly framed by someone else. It must be John Cam too who framed Connor. The emperor roared in anger. Silence. How can you make such baseless conclusions? Investigate this for Zhun. Zhang Cam Hoa walked before the emperor and said, Your Majesty, this subject is not feeling well and asked to be excused first. The emperor nodded at her. Rest assured, Zhun will definitely get justice for you. Kin Nam Kwang also bowed to take his leave. Father Emperor, your son will escort Miss Jiang back to her residence. Go on. The two then turned and walked out. Zhang Cam Hoa let out a sigh of relief. This disgusting engagement is finally about to be dissolved. At Yujing Palace, Kin Nam Kwang looked at Zhang Cam Hoa and said, The reason I invited Miss Jiang to the palace today was to ask you to examine my eldest brother. After my eldest brother was deposed, his health has not been good, and he has always been hiding away in Yujing Palace. A few days ago, if I hadn't happened to run into him and felt something was strange, I'm afraid I wouldn't have discovered John Cam 2's plot. John Cam Hoa smiled at him. Then I should thank your highness for that. A eunuch standing outside saw the two arrive and hurriedly bowed. Apologies for the trouble, your highness and Miss Jiang. The master has been seriously ill these past few days and cannot be exposed to the wind. John Cam Hoa looked at him and said, Please lead the way. The two followed the eunuch inside. She was shocked to see the dark, cobweb-filled palace. He was once the crown prince. After all, how could he be living in such a dilapidated place? It's very detrimental to one's health. Kin Nam Hien looked at her and asked, What illness do I have? Miss Jiang, you can speak frankly. No need to hide anything. Zhang Cam Hoa withdrew her hand and replied, The first prince's pulse indicates an injury from childhood that was not treated in time. She looked at Kin Nam Kwang beside her in surprise. Kin Nam Kwang looked at her and said, Eldest brother's constitution has not been good these past few years, and Yujing Palace is not a suitable place to recuperate from an illness. Zhang Cam Hoa now understood. It seemed there was a hidden story behind the first prince's old injury. She looked at Kanam Hien and said with a smile, The first prince has a weak constitution and will develop a dry cough when exposed to damp winds. You can place more plants and scented sachets to dehumidify the air. The eunuch standing beside them snorted and looked at her. I thought the disciple of the medical saint would be so brilliant, but it turns out you're not. Kin Nam Hien coughed lightly to remind him, Do not be rude. He looked at Zhang Cam Hoa and said, After being deposed, I am merely living on borrowed time. Perhaps illness is also a kind of release. He lowered his eyes, his gaze sorrowful. Zhang Cam Hoa was fuming. She slammed the table and stood up. What are you talking about? I don't know what grievances you have suffered, but if you feel it's unfair, shouldn't you live, well, all the more? Only by living do you have a chance to fight back. Since coming here, I have endured many assassination attempts. My reputation as a venomous woman, my body afflicted with cold poison. If I were like him, the grass on my grave would already be over 2 meters tall. Zhang Cam Hoa angrily squeezed her eyes shut. She gave Kanam Hien a hard pat on the shoulder, then grabbed his sleeve and pulled him outside. Follow me. Look at the flowers and grass outside, the blue sky, the birds and butterflies flying around and landing on the blades of grass. Zhang Cam Hoa smiled and rolled up her sleeves. Right now, I'll teach you a lesson. Practice every day to strengthen your body. Kin Nam Hien stood behind her, looking at her in astonishment. Zhang Cam Hoa's face darkened with anger. She turned her head, pointed at Kanam Hien's face, and scolded, Don't you dare put on this I don't want to live act. You will practice for real for me. Kin Nam Kwang, standing behind her, also cheerfully rolled up his sleeves. Zhang Cam Hoa turned her head, looked at him in surprise, and asked, What are you getting excited about? Kin Nam Kwang smiled and replied, I want to learn too, to improve my constitution. The carriage stopped in front of the palace gate, and Kin Nam Kwang helped Zhang Cam Hoa into the carriage. Noyet Lin was stunned and about to run forward when a hand pulled her back. Noyet Lin turned her head in surprise. Datan looked at her and asked, Where are you going? Noyet Lin looked at him and replied as if it were obvious. Of course, I'm following my lady. Datan looked at her, exasperated. He grabbed Noyet Lin's hand tightly and pulled her along. You'll just have to sit here with me. The two sat at the back of the carriage. Datan looked at Noyet Lin helplessly. This little maid has no tact at all. Inside the carriage, John Cam Hoa looked at Kanam Kwong and said, "You cut me off just now. Is there a hidden story behind the first prince's injury?" The smile on Kanam Kwong's face suddenly froze. He began to tell her, "My eldest brother was once the crown prince. When Father Emperor was choosing an heir, he only had one son. Although my eldest brother was born to a palace maid, Father Emperor still made him the crown prince. Who would have thought that in the next 2 years, the imperial harem would give birth to several more princes? The princes grew up one by one. One year, during a palace banquet, a rumor suddenly spread that my eldest brother was having an affair with Father Emperor's favored consort. That year, the favored consort was given 3 feet of white silk to end her life, and my eldest brother was also deposed, sentenced to 50 strokes, and confined to the Yujing Palace. It was then that my eldest brother fell gravely ill." John Cam Hoa looked at him and suddenly asked, "Do you think the first prince was framed?" Kin Nam Kwong looked at her in surprise for a moment, then nodded and replied, "My eldest brother has always been gentle and courteous. He would never do such a thing." John Cam Hoa touched her chin thoughtfully. "Indeed, after meeting the first prince today, I feel even more that he is not that kind of person. Is it a coincidence?" Kin Nam Kwong suddenly realized something. He looked at her pensively and said, "Now that you mention it, after that favored consort died, noble consort Chen immediately gained favor." John Cam Hoa was shocked. It seems the noble consort was pulling the strings from behind. Her face darkened. Kin Nam Kwong also lowered his head in silence. John Cam Hoa looked at him, smiled, and said, "I originally wanted to cut off her wings and deal with John Cam too once and for all, but now it seems I should let the fish grow bigger." Kin Nam Kwong smiled with interest and looked at her. "What does my ally want my help with this time?" John Cam Hoa didn't answer, but asked him in return. Then this time, "What do you want from me?" She gently took his hand. Kin Nam Kwong looked at her. Suddenly, arrows flew swiftly and embedded themselves in the carriage. Kin Nam Kwong quickly pulled John Cam Hoa to one side. The two of them stared in stunned surprise at the arrows stuck in the carriage. Kin Nam Kwong roared angrily. Datan and several subordinates drew their swords. Looking around warily, "Your Highness, we are surrounded." Kin Nam Kwong narrowed his eyes, his gaze sharp and cold. He drew the sword in his hand and said coldly, "Protect the carriage for me." The assassins holding swords shouted, "Hand over the person in the carriage, and we will spare your lives." Kin Nam Kwong looked at them with a cold, sharp expression and said, "Tell me who sent you, and I will also spare your lives." The assassins shouted angrily, "Nonsense! Attack!" Kin Nam Kwong rushed forward to fight them. John Cam Hoa lifted the curtain and looked at him worriedly. The sixth prince's cold poison hasn't been purged, and he caught a cold after falling into the water a few days ago. He can't use his internal energy right now, or else. She saw a figure rushing towards him. John Cam Hoa was startled and shouted, "Behind you!" The assassin ambushed Kin Nam Kwong from behind. Die. Kin Nam Kwong's sharp eyes glanced behind him. He immediately turned and stabbed the assassin. With one thrust, suddenly his eyes constricted. Kin Nam Kwong supported himself with his sword and collapsed to his knees. John Cam Hoa ran over worriedly. "Sixth Prince." She took a small ball from her sleeve and threw it at the assassins. John Cam Hoa went to support Kin Nam Kwong and said worriedly, "My sleeping drug is very potent. This is the antidote. Drink it." Kin Nam Kwong ordered Datan. "Datan, leave one alive." Datan quickly replied, "Yes." Kin Nam Kwong smiled and hugged John Cam Hoa. "I helped you today so we could be considered to be in the same boat. However, let this prince protect you." John Cam Hoa blushed in embarrassment. Who's helping whom is not yet certain. The sleeping drug began to dissipate. Datan, holding an assassin, saw Kin Nam Kwong before him and quickly threw the assassin aside, rushing over to support him. Kin Nam Kwong coldly pulled his arm back. Datan stared blankly at his empty hand for a moment, then smiled sheepishly, rubbing his head and said, "His Highness used his internal energy, and now the cold poison has flared up again. I beg the eldest young miss to save my master." John Cam Hoa nodded and replied, "Of course, let's hurry back to the manor." The sky began to darken, and the carriage quickly departed. In the carriage, Kin Nam Kwong closed his eyes and rested on John Cam Hoa's shoulder. Jong Kim-hoa opened her eyes and thought silently. Who on earth would dare to make a move in the capital? And why do they want to kill me? Upon returning to the sixth prince's manor, maids bustled in and out carrying water. Jong Kim-hoa sat by the bed, looking at the unconscious Kim Nam-kwon. There was a large purple mark on his chest. Jong Kim-hoa looked at him worriedly. The flare-up of the cold poison is severe this time. Ordinary medicine is no longer effective. Datan looked at her anxiously and asked, he was conscious before. Why did he suddenly fall unconscious? Jong Kim-hoa looked at him and instructed, bring me the medicine box quickly. I need to perform acupuncture on him. Just then, Noyet Lin walked in carrying a medicine box and said to her, young miss, here is your medicine box. A small candle was lit. Jong Kim-hoa passed a small needle over the flame. She inserted the needles one by one into Kim Nam-kwon's body. Kim Nam-kwon's face was pale, and cold sweat covered his face. Jong Kim-hoa looked at him and said, the cold poison on his chest is gradually dissipating. He should be out of danger. She turned her head to look at Datan and asked, why was the sixth prince afflicted with cold poison, and so severely? Datan said awkwardly, the young miss should ask his highness yourself. Jong Kim-hoa didn't make it difficult for him and nodded in reply. All right, the sixth prince will be fine after some rest. You. Suddenly, Kim Nam-kwon reached out and touched her hand. Are you leaving? Jong Kim-hoa looked at him in surprise. You're awake? How so quickly? Kim Nam-kwon weakly sat up and looked at her, asking cough. Are you leaving now? Jong Kim-hoa looked at him in silence. He was seriously injured because he saved me. I should stay and take care of him, but when I'm with him, my emotions are in turmoil. Why am I like this? Kim Nam-kwon lowered his head and asked coldly, don't you want to know who wants to harm you? Jong Kim-hoa looked directly into Kim Nam-kwon's eyes. Kim Nam-kwon looked at her with a weak, pleading gaze. Don't leave me. Jong Kim-hoa sat down, tacitly agreeing with him. Let me guess. Is it the fourth prince? Kim Nam-kwon shook his head and replied, it's noble consort Shun. She wants to put Kim Nam-kwon on the throne as crown prince. Haven't I always been a thorn in there? Sighed. He lowered his eyes to hide the bitterness in his heart. When I was 5 years old, she poisoned me with the cold poison. And just now, you completely ruined Kim Nam-kwon's reputation. So of course noble consort Shun will hold a grudge against you. Kim Nam-kwon looked up at her with a smile that wasn't a smile and asked, what now? It seems we are tied to the same boat. Jong Kim-hoa looked at him, shocked and heartbroken. Poisoned with cold poison at 5 years old. All those years without medicine to suppress it. How did he manage to endure? She raised her hand and gently caressed his cheek. Kim Nam-kwon looked at her, stunned and surprised. Jong Kim-hoa looked at him and said seriously, don't worry, I will definitely cure your cold poison. Kim Nam-kwon smiled gently and took her hand. This prince trusts you. Late at night in the prime minister's manor, Jong Kim-hoa and Noyet Lin finally returned. Jong Kim-hoa opened her door and was surprised to see a figure sitting on the floor in her room. It was the prime minister still in the room, waiting for her to return. Jong Kim-hoa looked at him in surprise and asked, Father, it's so late. Why haven't you rested yet? The prime minister sat dejectedly on the floor, looking completely lifeless, and said weakly, it's all over. The reputation of our Jong family is ruined. Jong Kim-hoa looked at Noyet Lin beside her and said, go get the jade pendant from my jewelry box. Noyet Lin looked at her and quickly replied, yes. The candles in the room were lit. Jong Kim-hoa looked at the prime minister and asked, Father, are you worried about my younger sister? The prime minister looked at her worriedly and said, your sister is locked up in the palace. Noble consort Shun is putting all the blame on her. What are we to do? At that moment, Noyet Lin came over with a small box. Young Mississippi Jong Kim-hoa opened the wooden box and handed a jade pendant to the prime minister, saying, Father, this is the fourth prince's personal jade pendant. Find someone to give it to Cam Tuesday. She will know what to do. The prime minister took the jade pendant, his expression immediately brightening. If we can save Cam too, our Jong family will be safe. The imperial study in the palace. The emperor sat above, looking coldly at Jong Cam, Tu kneeling on the ground. Jong Cam Tu, do you admit that you seduced the fourth prince first? Jong Cam Tu said quickly in fear. The fourth prince and I have deep feelings for each other. He even gave me a token of engagement. Kim Nam-kwon's face darkened as he shouted angrily, nonsense. When did I ever give you a token of engagement? Jong Cam Tu immediately raised the jade pendant for the emperor to see. This is the fourth prince's personal jade pendant. Your majesty will know it when you see it. When Kim Nam-kwon saw the jade pendant, he was stunned in disbelief. He angrily snatched the pendant back and yelled, you're lying. I gave this to Cam Hoa. It was her. John Cam too pretended to be pitiful and weak, explaining, since I was imprisoned, I haven't met anyone at all. The fourth prince gave me this jade pendant. I have always carried it with me and never taken it off. An angry shout echoed. Enough. The teacup on the table was thrown to the ground, shattering. The emperor's face darkened as he shot to his feet and roared in anger. Fourth son, from now on, your engagement to John Cam Hoa is cancelled. Since you have ruined Cam Two's purity, you must take responsibility. Kin Nam Khan, his face pale with fear, replied unwillingly, your son is willing to take John Cam 2 as a secondary consort. Elsewhere, Noyet Lin stood beside John Cam Hoa and asked, confused, young miss, the second young miss is so vicious. Why did you save her? John Kim Hoa picked up her teacup and gave a cold smile. Save her? She stood up, a glint in her eyes. No, I just want to watch those two dogs bite each other. Kin Nam Kwang raised his sharp sword. He narrowed his eyes at the wooden post in front of him, then swung his sword, splitting the post in two. Jia Tan looked at him worriedly and quickly reminded him, Your Highness, your body is not yet recovered. You should rest a little more. Kin Nam Kwang took a cloth to wipe the sharp sword in his hand and said indifferently, I'm much better already. Don't disturb my sword practice. At this moment, a servant came to report, Your Highness, eldest Miss Jiang has arrived. Hearing this, Jia Tan smiled. Your Highness, Miss Jiang comes so frequently to check your pulse. She is truly good to you. Indeed. He turned his head to look at the person beside him. Your Highness, but it was empty beside him. No one was there. John Cam Hoa was led in by a servant. Kin Nam Kwang lay on the bed, pretending to be weak as he looked at her. You're here. John Cam Hoa hurried over, looking at him worriedly, and asked, Why are you sweating so much? Are you uncomfortable somewhere? Kin Nam Kwang felt a pang of guilt and lay still on the bed, not daring to speak. Oh no, it's because I ran back so quickly. That's why I'm sweating. John Kim Hoa took out a handkerchief, worriedly preparing to wipe the sweat for him. Kin Nam Kwang took this opportunity, his cheeks flushing as he looked at her, and suggested, I haven't been feeling well lately. Why don't you stay in the residence for a few days? It would be good to observe me for a few days. Jia Tan stared at him dumbfounded. Your Highness, you didn't say that just now. Seeing him say this, John Cam Hoa nodded in agreement. That'll be fine. Your injuries have not yet healed. I shouldn't leave now either. She turned her head to look at Noyet Lin and said, Noyet Lin, you go back to the manor. Inform my father. And while you're at it, bring some of my personal belongings here. Noyet Lin looked at her worriedly. It's not very appropriate for an unmarried man and woman to be in the same place. Kin Nam Kwang glared angrily at Jia Tan. Jia Tan felt goosebumps all over, as if thousands upon thousands of knives were stabbing him. So, he fearfully rushed to cover Noyet Lin's mouth. Your Highness, I'll take Noyet Lin away and help bring the things back. John Cam Hoa watched in surprise as Jia Tan dragged Noyet Lin and ran out like the wind. Kin Nam Kwang let out a slight smile. You know what's good for you? He looked at John Cam Hoa and asked curiously. That's right. I've always been curious. Why are you so knowledgeable about cold poison? John Cam Hoa lowered her eyes and replied, When I was born, I already carried the cold poison in my body. The doctor said I wouldn't live past the age of 5. I was fortunate to meet the medical saint and received his teachings. But even a medical saint had no way to cure the cold poison. Master could only teach me to use poison, using poison to counteract poison to preserve my life. Suddenly, a hand took hers. It seems then, Kin Nam Kwang sat up, leaned close to her, and said with a smile, We truly are a match made in heaven. John Cam Hoa quickly pulled her hand back, her cheeks blushing as she shyly mumbled, It's more like we're fellow sufferers. John Cam Hoa closed the medicine box and looked at Kin Nam Kwang to ask, Right? Where will I be sleeping tonight? Kin Nam Kwang smiled and replied, Of course, you'll be in my main chamber. John Cam Hoa, displeased, raised an eyebrow at his fox-like smile. Catching her gaze, Kin Nam Kwang coughed a few times and said, putting on an act, This prince is too heavily poisoned. I haven't been able to sleep for days. If you're here, you can check on this prince's condition at any time. John Cam Hoa sighed and looked at him. All right, it's fine if I stay in the side chamber. Jia Tan and Noyet Lin stood by, surprised. At this scene, Kin Nam Kwang lay on the bed, smiling happily at her. Noyet Lin tugged on Jia Tan's sleeve and whispered awkwardly, I still have something to say. Jia Tan looked at her and reminded her. Don't say it. In the imperial palace, a palace maid came and whispered into noble consort Chen's ear. Noble consort Chen frowned and asked again. She's really staying there. She suddenly broke into a sinister smile. My son is being disciplined. You shouldn't expect to remain pure either. At this time, malicious rumors were spreading outside. Have you heard? Eldest Miss Jiang stayed at the sixth prince's residence last night. An unmarried man and an unwed woman. Isn't that like dry wood meeting a fierce fire? Jiang Cam Hoa, who was preparing medicine, heard these discussions and her face fell. The Empress Dowager and the Emperor looked at Kanam Kwong and asked, "What exactly is the situation?" Kanam Kwong calmly replied, "A few days ago, eldest Miss Jiang encountered assassins. Your subject was injured while stepping in to help. Eldest Miss Jiang had no choice but to stay at the prince's residence to save your subject." The Emperor looked at him worriedly and asked, "Have you found out who the assassins were?" Kanam Kwong shook his head and said, "Your subject killed most of them. Only one was left alive. He also committed suicide last night." The Emperor raised his eyebrows and said worriedly, "If that's the case, I will issue an edict to let Cam Hoa treat your injuries in peace, to stop the outsiders from talking nonsense." The Empress Dowager also looked at him with concern. "You're injured, so you should rest well. You should quickly return to your residence to recuperate. Leave the investigation to the Grand Court of Revision." Kanam Kwong quickly bowed. "Your subject will take his leave." The Emperor waved his hand. "Go." At the sixth prince's residence, seeing that Kanam Kwong had returned, Jiang Cam Hoa raised her eyebrows and looked at him angrily. "What did you run off to again? You're injured and still not behaving. Do you think you have too long to live?" Kanam Kwong smiled at her. He pretended to be weak and explained, "I was worried about someone's reputation, so I deliberately went to request an imperial edict. And in return, someone is blaming me even though I'm injured." Jiang Cam Hoa's heart ached with worry as she quickly went to support him. "Are you all right? Are you uncomfortable anywhere?" Kanam Kwong took the opportunity to lean on her shoulder. Jiang Cam Hoa's face flushed red. Kanam Kwong leaned on her shoulder, acting cute. "My back hurts a lot. Dr. Jiang, please help me." Jiang Cam Hoa looked at him resentfully and asked, "Here?" Kanam Kwong smiled and replied, "Yes." Jiang Cam Hoa looked at him and asked, Is it better?" Kanam Kwong looked at her and replied, "Not yet." A moment later, Jiang Cam Hoa asked again, "Feeling better?" Kanam Kwong replied again, "Not yet." Jiang Cam Hoa smiled and brought in a bowl of medicine. "Sixth Prince, time to drink your medicine." Kanam Kwong curled up in the blanket, refusing to drink the medicine and whining, "It's bitter. I won't drink it." Jiang Cam Hoa angrily pulled the blanket off him. "I've never seen a prince so childish." Kanam Kwong desperately held onto the blanket, refusing to let go. "I've been fine for so many years. I've lived just fine without drinking it." Seeing him refuse to cooperate, Jiang Cam Hoa's face darkened and she spoke coldly. "If that's the case, what's the use of me being here?" Kanam Kwong was stunned. Jiang Cam Hoa turned around angrily. "I won't bother the sixth prince any longer." Seeing she was angry and about to leave, Kanam Kwong quickly pulled her hand back. "Wait." He sat up abruptly, his brows furrowed with a pitiful expression. "It's not that this prince doesn't trust you. It's just that this prince is very heavily poisoned. It would take many years to completely eradicate it." Jiang Cam Hoa looked at him and said, "With me here, it will be cured sooner or later." Kanam Kwong was overjoyed. He looked at her with eyes full of anticipation. "Then, if there is no cure, will you still stay by this prince's side?" Jiang Cam Hoa was stunned, her cheeks flushing red. Her heart pounded relentlessly. She shyly closed her eyes and stammered, "If the patient is not cured, a physician like me will not stand by and do nothing. And watch." Kanam Kwong picked up the bowl of medicine on the table. His hand paused as he looked at her and said, "From now on, call me by my name." Jiang Cam Hoa was stunned and looked at him in surprise. Kanam Kwong held her hand tightly. Jiang Cam Hoa shyly stammered, Nam Kwong." Kanam Kwong smiled, happy and satisfied as he looked at her. Jiang Cam Hoa's face flushed red with embarrassment. I'll go brew you medicine." After saying that, she pulled her hand back and ran out quickly. "Take your time drinking it." The corner of Kanam Kwong's lips curled into a slight smile. He raised the bowl of medicine to his mouth and drank it happily. Elsewhere, the medicine pot was boiling vigorously. Jiang Cam Hoa's cheeks were bright red. She shyly patted her cheeks with her hands. Noyet Lin ran to the kitchen, saw her, and called out loudly. Mississippi. John Kamhoa was startled. Noyet Lin looked at her and said hurriedly, "The master has sent the second miss to visit Aunt Shun." John Kamhoa turned her back, her expression slightly surprised. "Huh?" She suddenly smiled. "If she has nothing to control the fourth prince with, I'm afraid the marriage won't happen. She's rushing to find Aunt Shun a plot." Noyet Lin looked at John Kamhoa curiously and asked, "What? Can't control the fourth prince?" John Kamhoa lifted the lid of the medicine pot, smiled, and replied, "A child, of course. My younger sister is getting married." She poured the medicine into a small bowl and continued coldly, "As her older sister, of course I have to help her soon give birth to a precious son." Noyet Lin looked at the small bowl of medicine and asked in surprise, "Miss, you can make that kind of medicine?" John Kamhoa picked up the medicine tray, a glint in her eyes, as she said meaningfully, "If I have an ally to cooperate with, it can naturally be done." At the sixth prince's residence, John Kamhoa and Noyet Lin walked in and said with a smile, "Sixth prince, could I borrow some of your people?" Nam Kwong, sitting at the dining table, looked at her. He took a handkerchief, wiped his hands clean, then handed the handkerchief to Jiatan and said gently, "Since you're here, let's eat together. Jiatan, bring another set of bowl and chopsticks." John Kamhoa smiled at him. "Thank you, Sixth Prince." She sat down and looked at Nam Kwong intently with surprise. In the past few days, the food was always brought by the kitchen staff. This is the first time I'm eating with him. As expected of a prince, even the way he eats is so elegant. John Kamhoa picked up a piece of meat to try, her expression surprised. Nam Kwong picked up a piece of food, smiled at her. "Here, you try this." He then fed the food to her. Nam Kwong smiled happily and asked her, "Is it good?" John Kamhoa's cheeks flushed red as she nodded while chewing. Nam Kwong's smile grew wider as he said, "Eat some more." Noyet Lin, standing nearby, looked at Jiatan and asked, "Is it really that good?" Jiatan chuckled, looked at Noyet Lin, and whispered enticingly, "Want some? Call me Gitch, and I'll give you some to eat." Noyet Lin's face darkened with anger. Her cheeks puffed up. She stomped hard on his foot. Jiatan cried out softly in pain. "Ouch!" Noyet Lin stuck out her tongue and made a face at him provocatively. Jiatan clutched his leg, laughing helplessly as he looked at Noyet Lin with an indulgent and doting expression. On this side, Nam Kwong put his chopsticks down on the table. He took a handkerchief, wiped his hands clean, and looked at her to ask, "Tell me, what kind of people do you want?" John Kamhoa took a handkerchief, carefully wiped her mouth, and looked at him, saying, "I want to borrow a few people who are skilled at spreading news." "The rumors." Nam Kwong smiled and agreed. "You can ask the Tan. However, I'm curious to see who will meet with misfortune this time." John Kamhoa smiled mysteriously and replied, "Sixth Prince, you'll know if you just wait and see." She stood up, turned, and walked out. Suddenly, she remembered, "Oh, right." John Kamhoa turned her head back to look at him and asked, "Sixth Prince, what do you want this time?" Nam Kwong touched his chin, pretending to think that, He suddenly broke into a smile, looked at her, and suggested, "Then dine with me every day." John Kamhoa's cheeks flushed red. She shyly turned her back to him and replied, "All right." Elsewhere in a dilapidated old house, John Kam too knelt on the ground, looking at concubine Shun, who was dressed plainly and no longer had the air of a noble lady, and asked, "Mother, the fourth prince is delaying and doesn't want to marry me. What should I do?" Concubine Shun frowned, looking at her for a moment before speaking comfortingly to her. "Don't be afraid. As long as you have a child, the fourth prince cannot refuse to marry you." John Kam too, with a bewildered and worried expression, asked, "But where am I supposed to get a child from right now?" Concubine Shun gave her a cold smile. "Tomorrow, follow me somewhere. I guarantee you will successfully marry the fourth prince." The rain was pouring down. In front of a small house, Concubine Shun led John Kam Tu over and looked inside, and asked into the house, "Excuse me, are you the deity who specializes in selling medicine?" Inside the house, an old man, his eyes blindfolded with a white cloth, was grinding herbs. Hearing her words, he asked, "Honored guest, are you here to buy a pregnancy potion?" Concubine Shun nodded and replied, "Yes, that's right." The old man smiled and said, "Follow me." He then took out a small vial of medicine from a box, turned his head, and said, "This medicine of mine, as long as you have been intimate recently, you will definitely be able to get pregnant after drinking it." She looked at the small vial in his hand. John Kam Tu hastily reached out to grab it. "Quick, quick, give it to me." The old man turned, and John Kam Tu grabbed at empty air. The old man spoke indifferently, "But this medicine uses many rare herbs. 10,000 taels of silver, no more, no less." John Cam too looked at him in astonishment. 10,000 tails. She was so angry she gritted her teeth. As long as I can get pregnant. Then, a mother's status will rise with her sons. Though her heart ached, John Cam too gritted her teeth and agreed. I'll buy it. Earlier, at the sixth prince's residence, the old man had given John Cam Hoa a stack of bank notes. John Cam Hoa looked at the stack of banknotes in her hand, smiled, and said, John Cam too will definitely send people to watch you. Wait until she is pregnant, then you can leave with peace of mind. The old man replied respectfully yes. Elsewhere, exquisite food was laid out on the table. John Cam Hoa, holding the stack of banknotes, happily ran in, looked at Kanam Kwong, and said excitedly, Sixth Prince, thank you for lending me your man. In a few days, we can start spreading the rumors about John Cam too. Kanam Kwong smiled gently and fed her a piece of food. This prince is your accomplice. Who would I help if not you? Let's eat together. John Cam Hoa's small face flushed red. She shyly replied softly, hum. A few days later, at the Jiang residence's Cam 2 pavilion, a physician came to take her pulse. The prime minister looked at the physician and asked urgently, how is it? The physician looked at him awkwardly. This is a joyful pulse. The prime minister frowned deeply and ordered everyone in the room. No one is allowed to spread this matter. After speaking, he and the physician left. John Cam too sat up, lifted the curtain, looked at the servant beside her, and called softly Tonner. She gave a sinister smile and said, find someone to spread a rumor for me. I want everyone in the city to know that I am carrying the fourth prince's flesh and blood. Not long after, the entire capital was abuzz with discussion. Have you guys heard? The second Miss Jiang who was caught in the act the other day was with the fourth prince. And the fourth prince is the fiancé of the eldest Miss Jiang. Who would have thought she would climb into the fourth prince's bed, ruining her own sister's marriage? I also heard that the second Mrs. Mother had an affair with a servant and contracted a venereal disease. Like mother, like daughter. The fourth prince is truly pitiful. Even though he was framed, he still has to bring that venomous-hearted creature home. John Cam Hoa sat in a tea house, leisurely enjoying her tea, a slight smile playing on her lips. Imperial consort Chen's methods are quite good. This way, she can preserve Kanam Khan's reputation. The door to the room was kicked open forcefully. Kanam Khan, wearing a large hat, strode in aggressively and looked at her angrily. John Cam Hoa, how can you be so vicious? John Cam Hoa turned her head to look at him and replied calmly, why are you looking for me? The news was spread by John Cam to herself. I just came to watch the excitement. How was that vicious? Kanam Khan, his face pale with anger, looked at her. I don't think this prince doesn't know that you and Kanam Kwong are pulling strings behind the scenes. John Cam Hoa snorted coldly, looked at him, and reminded him, there are so many people here. Is the fourth prince being so loud? Are you complaining that there hasn't been enough excitement lately? Kanam Khan gritted his teeth in anger as he looked at her. You'd better not regret this later. After speaking, he angrily turned and left. At the sixth prince's residence, Noyet Lin entered the study, looked at Kanam Kwong, and called softly, Your Highness. She walked in carrying a bowl of medicine and said, the young miss told me to bring you your medicine. When Kanam Kwong saw that it was Noyet Lin, he was displeased, snorted coldly, and put down the book on the table. He crossed his arms over his chest, his face full of displeasure. Doesn't she owe this prince a few meals? He hadn't seen her for several days in a row. Seeing him so angry, Datan quickly pulled Noyet Lin aside and whispered, to ask, why hasn't your eldest miss come for a consultation recently? Noyet Lin looked at him and whispered, the young miss recently. Kanam Kwong stood to the side, curiously eavesdropping on the two of them talking. Noyet Lin leaned close to Datan's ear and whispered, she's busy writing script. She even said she wants to write one that will take the capital by storm. Kanam Kwong picked up his teacup, frowning and thinking to himself, what could be more important than me? The air was thick with the smell of sour vinegar. Not long after, John Cam Hoa excitedly came over with a stack of paper to show off to Kanam Kwong that I've finally finished writing it. She walked over to the desk to show him. Your Highness, can you help me see if this script is written? Well, Kanam Kwong picked up the stack of paper and read it. He looked at her in surprise. Is this script alluding to Kanam Khan? John Cam Hoa smiled smugly like a little fox and looked at him. Imperial consort Chun wants to whitewash him. Let's see if she has the ability to do so. I'll have to trouble your highness to help me find a new story dash. Tell her. Looking at her plump, red lips moving, Kin Nam Kwang couldn't take his eyes off her. He smiled and gently touched her ear. Your earring. Why aren't you wearing it today? The two of them locked eyes. John Cam Hoa shyly lowered her gaze and pushed his hand away. She jumped to her feet, looking for an excuse to flee. I'm brewing medicine. I'll leave the storyteller to you. After speaking, she flew out the door. Outside, John Cam Hoa's heart was pounding uncontrollably. Her small face was flushed red. She frowned deeply. He only asked me about the earring. Why am I so nervous? In the study, Kin Nam Kwang smiled as he watched the direction she ran, his eyes filled with amusement and a rare gentleness. A young lady who has come of age should wear earrings. Not long after, in the imperial palace, a memorial was slammed onto the table. The emperor angrily pointed down below and roared, "A prince who betrays trust, a secret pregnancy. The entire capital is spreading the script about you." He angrily threw the memorial at Kin Nam Khan, who was kneeling on the ground. The emperor looked at him furiously and asked, "You knew John Cam too was pregnant. Why didn't you quickly bring her home?" Kin Nam Khan lowered his head and gritted his teeth. "Your subject?" He tried to suppress the anger in his heart, then raised his head and replied, "I will marry John Cam tomorrow and settle this matter." A vicious and sinister light flashed in Kin Nam Khan's eyes. "Just you wait. I won't let you live in peace." The next day, a red sedan chair carried by 4 people moved somberly through the streets. John Cam too, wearing a bride's attire, sat in the sedan chair with her eyes closed. The sedan chair was set down. She opened her eyes, her gaze filled with joy that we're here. John Cam too was led inside by a matchmaker. Kin Nam Khan sat on a chair, looking at her with a cold gaze. John Cam too knelt on the ground as a physician took her pulse. After a moment, he looked at Kin Nam Khan and reported, "Your Highness, Prince Yin, the side consort's pulse does indeed indicate pregnancy." Kin Nam Khan looked at John Cam too with a cold expression. "Nourish the fetus well. Give me a noble son." The next day in the main hall of the Imperial Palace, the deputy of the Imperial Astronomy Bureau looked at the emperor and reported respectfully, "Your Majesty, this subject has observed the celestial phenomena day and night. The constellation of the residence is like a blazing fire, predicting the descent of a deity. I fear the child in the womb of Prince Yen's side consort, John Cam too, is a reincarnated true dragon, destined to one day inherit the throne and unify the world." Hearing this, the ministers looked at each other with their mouths agape in astonishment that we don't even know if Prince Yen's child is a boy or a girl. What do you mean by spouting such heresy? A pregnancy pulse is usually only detectable after a month, but this one was found in just half a month. If that's not a reincarnated true dragon, what is? A pulse in half a month. I fear it might be fake now. The emperor sat high above, his expression cold as he watched the ministers discussing below. A minister stepped forward, looked at the emperor, and reported, "Your Majesty, the eldest Miss Zhang's medical skills are brilliant. She is like a reincarnated goddess. Why not have her diagnose Prince Xian's side consort to see if it's real or fake? It won't be too late to consider the throne after that." The other ministers heard this and nodded in agree. The emperor looked at Kin Nam Kwang and asked, "Prince Kan, what do you think?" Kin Nam Kwang replied faintly, "Your subject will listen to your Majesty's command." Teacups were arranged neatly in a row on a tray. Kin Nam Kwang looked worriedly at John Cam Hoa. "Kin Nam Khan must have set up a scheme to frame us. However, it's not possible that you can't solve this, right?" John Cam Hoa let out a cold laugh. "I haven't even made a move yet, and they've already delivered themselves to my doorstep." Kin Nam Kwang took her hand, his eyes full of worry. "They've struck first to gain the advantage. You are in a passive position. No matter what you say, he can refute it." John Cam Hoa laughed cheerfully and looked at him. "Then wouldn't it be fine if I just go along with what he says?" Kin Nam Kwang stared at her in stunned surprise and asked, "What do you mean?" John Cam Hoa picked up her teacup and said with a smile, "He wants to make this child the true dragon emperor, so I will go along with his wishes. However, Prince Kan." She looked directly into Kin Nam Kwang's eyes and asked seriously, "Do you not want to inherit the throne?" Kin Nam Kwang stared at her blankly. This prince has not thought about it." John Cam Hoa gave him a beautiful smile. "Then your highness just needs to report the news at court for me, and I have ways to make them get hoist by their own petard." Kin Nam Kwang stared dazedly at her beautiful and lively face. This prince has no interest in fighting for power, but if you want to be the mother of the nation, this prince will fight with all his might. In the grand hall, after taking John Cam Too's pulse, John Kamhoa looked at the emperor and said with a smile, "Reporting to your majesty, Consort Xian's pulse is indeed a pregnancy pulse." The emperor frowned and looked at her seriously, asking, "You are a divine maiden. What do you think of what the Imperial Astronomy Bureau said?" Kinam Khan shot her a cold glance. John Kamhoa lowered her head and answered the emperor, "This divine maiden's talents are shallow and my knowledge is superficial. I do not understand the will of heaven. The Imperial Astronomy Bureau has always possessed vast supernatural powers. The matter of a true dragon's reincarnation must be true." Hearing this, Kinam Khan revealed a sinister, triumphant smile. After court was dismissed, John Kamhoa quickly left the grand hall with the other officials. Suddenly, a hand reached out, grabbed her arm, and pulled her to the side. Kinam Khan pulled her into a corner and asked with a smile, "Kamhoa, do you or do you not still like this prince? Is that why you spoke up for this prince today?" John Kamhoa shook his hand off and looked at him with a half smile. "What I said today was to harm you. Would you believe that?" Kinam Khan leaned his face close to hers and said with a smile, "You little vixen who says one thing but means another, you will be mine sooner or later." Suddenly, a hand reached up and pushed his head away from John Kamhoa. Kinam Kwang wrapped his arm around her and looked at him coldly with a warning. "You stay away from her." Seeing him, Kinam Khan's face darkened. "I never thought that for the sake of fighting for the throne, even you, who are usually so aloof, would learn how to please a woman." Kinam Kwang looked gently at John Kamhoa and said, "Go back and wait for me first." John Kamhoa glanced at him and then quickly left. After she was gone, Kinam Kwang's expression turned cold as he shot Kinam Khan a warning look. "You dare try to get ideas about her." Kinam Khan looked at him with a mocking smile. "She's already gone. Who are you putting on act for? Her mother is Princess Jinghe, the adopted daughter favored by the late emperor, and her father is the current prime minister. By getting her, you naturally gain a great supporter. Isn't it all for the sake of fighting for the throne? Who are you to act nobler than anyone else?" He narrowed his eyes and patted Kinam Kwang's shoulder. Kinam Kwang angrily grabbed Kinam Khan by the collar and slammed him hard against the wall. Kinam Khan's face turned pale as he let out a soft groan. Kinam Kwang looked at him with cold, resolute eyes and said through gritted teeth, "No, what you need is the prime minister's legitimate daughter. As for me, I only want John Kamhoa." Knowing that John Kamhoa was Kinam Kwang's weakness, Kinam Khan provoked him with a cold smile. "You hold the military power of the formidable Northwest Army, while the Zhang family leads the civil officials. If you two were together, Father Emperor would certainly become wary of you." He moved closer to Kinam Kwang and asked coldly, "Military power and John Kamhoa, which one do you choose?" The two faced each other, neither willing to back down, as if sparks were flying in the air between them. In the imperial palace, John Kamhoa walked alone down a corridor. She lowered her head, recalling the words Kinam Khan had just said. "I never thought that for the sake of fighting for the throne, even you, who are usually so aloof, would learn how to please a woman." At this thought, a sharp pain pierced John Kamhoa's heart. She clutched her chest, her face filled with sorrow that aren't Prince Can and I both just seeking to benefit from each other. At that moment, a eunuch passing by in the courtyard looked at her in surprise. "Isn't this Dr. Zhang?" Only then did John Kamhoa come to her senses. She looked around in surprise. When did I get to Yujing Palace?" The eunuch looked at her happily and asked, "Are you here to see my master, your highness? Please come inside." John Kamhoa forced a smile and replied, "All right." The eunuch led John Kamhoa inside and then looked at Kinam Hien to report, "Your highness, Dr. Zhang is here." Kinam Hien, sitting at a table holding a small medicine bottle, looked at her in surprise. "Eldest Miss Zhang has come to Yujing Palace. Is there something the matter?" John Kamhoa's attention was suddenly drawn to the small bottle in his hand, and she asked, "Your highness, this bottle is—" The eunuch standing behind him turned pale. He rushed forward and said to Kinam Hien, "Your highness, why are you looking at this bottle again? Let this servant throw it away for you." Kinam Hien clutched the bottle tightly in his hand and said to John Kamhoa, "You must have heard. Back then, everyone said I was in an illicit affair with Father Emperor's favorite consort. Only I know." He held up the medicine bottle in his hand. "That it was this thing that ruined me. Father Emperor didn't believe me, but I believe that as long as I have this, I will find the person who framed me." John Kamhoa's face grew solemn as she looked at the small medicine bottle. This bottle, fragmented memories appeared. In her mind, I've seen it. John Camho looked up at him and said seriously, it's the very thing the palace maid found on John Cam too. If your highness trusts me, could you let me take it to investigate? Kin Nam Hien nodded in agreement. Of course you can. John Cam Hoa took the small medicine bottle. She gave him a confident smile. First Highness, I will definitely get justice for you. After speaking, she turned and left. The eunuch standing behind looked at Kin Nam Hien with a joyful expression. Your Highness, it seems that since we met Dr. Zhang, everything has been a good thing. Kin Nam Hien nodded in response. Yes, perhaps she is the lucky star that has fallen upon my path. Outside the imperial palace, a carriage was parked. Kin Nam Quang sat in the carriage, his face dark. Military power and John Cam Hoa. Which one do you choose? He looked up, his brow furrowed. John Cam Hoa, do you have even a little bit of affection for me in your heart? Can I even choose you? At that moment, a loud call rang out, Six Highness. John Cam Hoa lifted the carriage curtain and smiled at him. Your Highness, lend me a few skilled investigators. Kin Nam Quang looked at her and said, didn't I tell you to call me Nam Quang? Why aren't you? John Cam Hoa scratched her face in embarrassment. Kin Nam Quang continued to question her. Also, didn't I tell you to come out and wait for me? It's been so long. Where on earth did you go? John Cam Hoa looked at him, confused. Your Highness. She looked at him carefully and asked, are you angry? She lowered her eyes in confusion. Why is he suddenly angry with me? Suddenly, she recalled the words Kin Nam Khan had just said. I never thought that for the sake of fighting for the throne, even you would learn how to please a woman. Her heart clenched in pain. John Cam Hoa lowered her head in disappointment. Could it be that all the kindness he showed me before was just a pretense? Her face darkened, and she spoke coldly. We are nothing more than allies. What other relationship could I possibly have with your Highness? Kin Nam Quang's expression darkened. He let out a cold laugh. And what if I don't see you as an ally? He looked up and stared directly into her eyes. John Cam Hoa glanced at him. Her hand, resting on her lap, clenched into a fist. Yes. Oh, he really just wants to use me. What was I even hoping for? In that case, I won't disturb the sixth prince any longer. After speaking, she coldly moved to step down from the carriage. Kin Nam Quang was stunned. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her back. The two of them stared into each other's eyes. John Cam Hoa looked at him in surprise, her cheeks flushing red. Kin Nam Quang stared directly into her eyes. He lowered his head, looked straight into her eyes, and said, close your eyes. John Cam Hoa's face was bright red. As if hypnotized, she slowly closed her eyes. Kin Nam Quang leaned down and kissed her on the lips. A moment later, they broke apart, panting, the air thick with intimacy. Kin Nam Quang looked directly in her eyes, his gaze firm and serious as he said, John Cam Hoa, I don't see you as an ally. I want to kiss you. I want to keep you. He then took a small box from his sleeve. I want to leave my mark on you. The small box was opened. Kin Nam Quang took out the earring and carefully put it on for Hermine. Kin Nam Quang gently caressed the earring on her ear. He pulled his hand back to stroke her cheek and asked gently, do you understand my meaning? After speaking, he turned his head and called to Datan outside. Datan, take Miss Zhang back to the Prime Minister's residence. After saying this, he stepped out of the carriage. Zhang Cam Hoa, having come back to her senses, looked at Kin Nam Quang and asked, where are you going? Kin Nam Quang smiled at her and said, if I stay by your side any longer, I can't be sure I'll be able to maintain my sanity. Go home and think about my words. He stared at her beautiful and gentle face for a long time before continuing, don't make me wait long. Late at night in the Prime Minister's residence, on the table were 2 small spools of thread, a pair of scissors, 2 small pieces of cloth, and a small candle. John Cam Hoa smiled and gently touched the earring. A smile full of happiness spread across her face. John Cam Hoa picked up the scissors and cut a small lock of her hair, then rolled it up and tucked it into a red pouch. Once done, John Cam Hoa hung it on the tree in front of her room, the same place where she had once left the antidote for the cold poison for Kin Nam Quang. In the imperial study, Kin Nam Quang and the emperor were playing chess together. The emperor picked up a black chess piece and looked at him, asking, why do you have the leisure to play chess with us today? Kin Nam Quang took out a white chess piece and placed it on the board, then looked at the emperor and said seriously, Father Emperor, your son and subject admires the eldest miss of the Zhang family and wishes to take her as his wife. The emperor, holding the black chess piece in his hand, asked in surprise, Zhang Cam Hoa? Kin Nam Quang nodded in reply. Yes, I hope Father Emperor will grant my wish. The emperor reached into the small jar beside him, took out a black gold piece, placed it on the board, and said nonchalantly, Prime Minister Jiang is likely unwilling to marry his daughter so far away. If you wish to marry, then stay in the capital. Hand the military tally over to me. I will send someone else to the northwest. Looking at the gold board before him, Ji Nankang was silent for a moment, then agreed, I obey your command. Outside the imperial palace, Yi Qing sat outside, driving the horse-drawn carriage back to the manor. He spoke up and asked, Your Highness, the emperor is using this marriage to suppress you and take back your military authority. Don't you mind? Ji Nankang, sitting inside the carriage, closed his eyes slightly. How could I not mind? That is the northwest that I built with my own hands, and now I must hand it over to someone else. But, recalling that beautiful and kind smile, he said softly, She is worth it. Ji Nankang let out a cold laugh, He looked up, his eyes filled with confidence and pride. Do you think that without the military tally, I can't command the Northwest Army? Ji Nankang looked at Yi Qing, smiled cheerfully, and gave an order to the Jiang Manor. I want to see my fiancée. A moment later, at the Jiang Manor, the carriage was parked outside. The Prime Minister came out to receive him. Ji Nankang looked at him and said, Father Emperor will issue the decree tomorrow. I wish to see the eldest Miss Jiang. The Prime Minister, looking troubled, bowed his head and cut him off, refusing, Your Highness, it is against etiquette. The Jiang Manor is currently embroiled in much gossip. This old servant is truly afraid. I invite you to please return. After speaking, he closed the door. Staring at the tightly shut door in front of them, Ji Nankang and Yi Qing stared at each other, wide-eyed and stunned. Ji Nankang let out a sigh. He turned and walked away helplessly. Seeing him pacing back and forth, Yi Qing spoke up, Your Highness, perhaps we should come back tomorrow. He saw Ji Nankang suddenly smile and roll up his sleeves. Yi Qing looked at him, confused. Suddenly, without a word, Ji Nankang climbed the wall and jumped into the Prime Minister's manor. Yi Qing was stunned. Your Highness. Ji Nankang landed. He let out a soft ah. Seeing Jiang Jinhua sitting in the small courtyard, what a coincidence. Jiang Jinhua turned her head and looked at him in surprise. Prince Jin, how did you? Ji Nankang stepped closer. He raised a finger to her lips, silencing her that I told you to call me by my name, but you wouldn't listen. In that case, Ji Nankang took her by the shoulders, leaned his face close, and smiled, looking directly into Jiang Jinhua's eyes. Next time, just call me husband. Jiang Jinhua's cheeks flushed red as she stared at Ji Nankang, her mouth agape in astonishment. Husband? What husband? Prince Jin held her shoulders, smiled, and said, I asked Father Emperor to make you my consort. I will come to the Jiang Manor tomorrow to propose. It's just that you still haven't given me an answer. Jiang Jinhua's cheeks were bright red. Her plump, red lips parted, moving but unable to form words. Ji Nankang gripped her hand tightly and asked, Are you willing? He looked at her, his eyes full of deep affection. Jin, are you willing to marry me? Jiang Jinhua, embarrassed, I am willing. Seeing her agree, Ji Nankang couldn't hide his happiness. He excitedly wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into a tight embrace. Ji Nankang closed his eyes and said with satisfaction that it settled. In his arms, Jiang Jinhua's cheeks flushed red. She raised her hands and hugged him back tightly. Jiang Jinhua broke into a happy smile. Yi Qing and Yu Ling were hiding in a corner, secretly observing the two. Yu Ling, seeing him sketching and drawing this whole time, asked confusedly, You're hiding here just to draw this thing? Yi Qing sighed and said, You're still young. You wouldn't understand. Yu Ling puffed her cheeks and glared at him angrily. Yi Qing chuckled and gave Yu Ling's hair bun a tug. Little girl, hurry up and grow up. After saying that, he continued to observe Ji Nankang and Jiang Jinhua, sketching and drawing. Yu Ling held her hair bun and thought angrily to herself, What's that supposed to mean? Isn't it just about pursuing a woman? I like to see what kind of beau tie you pursue. Over here, Jiang Jinhua looked at Ji Nankang and said, Oh, right, I have something to show you. She took his hand and pulled him along. Follow me inside. Inside the room, looking at the small medicine vial in his hand, Ji Nankang looked at Jiang Jinhua and asked, You're saying this vial from your eldest brother is the same type as the drug that harmed you last time? Jiang Jinhua nodded and replied, Yes. With this, we can definitely trace it back to noble consort Shen and get revenge for you. Ji Nankang looked at her and said, As for revenge, there's no hurry. Seeing how calm he was, Jiang Jinhua looked at him, surprised and anxious. She poisoned you when you were 5 years old, and you're still not in a hurry? Seeing her so concerned about him, Jin Nankang was very moved. He reached out and pulled her into his arms, because right now, there are more important things. The betrothal gifts, the inquiry of names. Jin Nankang raised his hand and gently smoothed her furrowed brow. The auspicious date selection, the presentation of the betrothal gifts, the wedding date request, and only then, the wedding. Jin Nankang gently kissed Jiang Jinhua's forehead. Jin, it would be great if we could get married tomorrow. I can't wait any longer. Elsewhere, a fragrance filled the air. A palace maid leaned close to noble consort Chen's ear and reported, "Your ladyship, the person has been brought." Sitting on her chair, noble consort Chen gave a sinister smile. Good. Even if Jiang Jintu's child is a daughter, I am not afraid. At the Jiang Manor, a eunuch was announcing a decree.by imperial edict. The prime minister's legitimate daughter, Jiang Jinhua, is of outstanding appearance and virtuous character. She and the sixth prince are a match made in heaven. She is hereby bestowed the title of Princess Jin, with a wedding date to be chosen. The entire Jiang family clasped their hands and bowed. No need. Jiang Jinhua received the imperial edict. I accept the decree. Eunuchly waved his hand, signaling, "Bring them in." The guards immediately brought in brown wooden chests. Prime Minister Jiang's face darkened as he asked, "Is not yet the day for betrothal gifts?" Eunuchly, "What is this?" Eunuchly replied, "These are some small gifts from the sixth prince for the princess to amuse herself. They do not count as betrothal gifts." Yuling said excitedly to Jiang Jinhua, "Miss, the sixth prince is so thoughtful towards you." Jiang Jinhua put on a stern face. He didn't come. How am I supposed to use all these things he sent? Let's go back to the Wuhua courtyard. At this moment, in a shop, Jin Nankang was happily choosing items. The shop owner came out cheerfully. "Prince Jin, here is your hairpin." Jin Nankang asked Yiqing, "What about you? Have you set your eyes on anything? I will buy it as a reward for you." A young man selling candied hawthorns walked by. "Candied hawthorns here." Yiqing replied to Jin Nankang, "Thank you, your highness. It's still too early for your subordinate." With that, Yiqing ran over to the young man selling candied hawthorns and took a stick. "If the little girl doesn't grow up soon, I can only coax her with candy." At this time, Jiang Jinhua was standing leisurely by a wall. Yuling walked over and asked, "Miss, what are you doing standing here?" Jiang Jinhua smiled. "Wait and see. Someone will be here in a moment." Yuling was curious. "Who is it?" After waiting a while, a hand suddenly touched the top of the wall. Jin Nankang nimbly vaulted over. He was suddenly startled by Jiang Jinhua's voice. "Since you like climbing walls so much, in a few days, I'll plant roses on the wall." Jin Nankang moved closer to her. "I came to deliver a gift myself, yet my princess is thinking of ways to torture me." He moved closer, handing her a small box that, "Why princess is so cruel." Jiang Jinhua took the item. She immediately turned her face away. "That's right. I'm a venomous woman, cruel-hearted. If you don't like it, then don't marry me." Jin Nankang slowly reached his hand past her face and gently lifted Jiang Jinhua's chin, softly kissing her honey-sweet lips. Jin Nankang touched his hand to Jiang Jinhua's lips. "I don't like hearing you talk like that. If you say it again, I'll punish you just like today." Jiang Jinhua blushed and covered her mouth with her hand. Jin Nankang picked up the small box. The tip of the pin is made of silver. It can test for poison. He gently opened the box. Inside was a beautiful hairpin. Twist the blood jade, and you can store a small amount of antidote. Jin Nankang held up the hairpin. "This blood jade matches your earrings and jade pendant." He gently placed it in Jiang Jinhua's hair, a perfect fit. Jin Nankang then lifted Jiang Jinhua's chin and said, "The flower festival is coming up." He kissed her lips. "I want everyone in the world to know that such a peerless beauty is my Jin Nankang's princess." In a certain garden, everyone was sitting and waiting for Jiang Jinhua. In a moment, Jiang Jinhua appeared. "Jinhua is here." The empress said, "Come quickly and sit next to me." Then she gently shifted over. Jiang Jinhua slowly walked over. Seeing this, Jin Nankang smiled slyly. She approached hesitantly. After sitting down, Jiang Jinhua blushed. Seeing this, Jin Nankang gently took her hand to comfort her, making her even more shy. The empress lifted her teacup and glanced at the two of them. This marriage was decreed just right. Delicious pastries were arranged on the banquet table. The empress said, "Jinhua, this is your first time attending the flower festival." Jiang Jinhua held a piece of pastry in her hand. The flower festival is a day for admiring flowers and drinking wine. There has always been a custom where an unmarried man finds a fresh flower and places it by the ear of the woman he admires. The beautiful flower signifies good fortune. The empress asked Jin Nankang, "Old Sixth, what flower have you prepared? Quickly bring it out for Jinhua to see." Jin Nankang slowly took out a box. "Your grandson has prepared a flower that suits flower very well." He gently opened the box. Inside was a lovely red rose. A few days ago, Jiang Jinhua had said, "In a few days, I'll plant roses on the wall." Jin Nankang gently took the rose and placed it in Jiang Jinhua's hair. Jiang Jinhua blushed. "Why a rose?" Jin Nankang replied, "Because roses are very fragrant. I'm still waiting for you to plant a whole courtyard full of them." Jiang Jinhua shyly reached up and smoothed her hair. Jin Nankang looked at her, pleased with himself. At this moment, a young woman approached. "The side consort of Prince Xian has arrived." This is the side consort who is pregnant with the reincarnated true dragon. The servants looked at her and judged. "Look at her. That appearance is truly menacing, isn't it?" Prince Xian quickly greeted. "Long time no see." Jiang Kam Hoa bowed her head, paying him no mind. Jiang Kam too sneered. "Older sister, why are you dressed so poorly?" Jiang Kam too said with a look full of contempt. "Didn't the sixth prince give you some beautiful clothes? To let you dress so shabbily?" Jiang Kam Hoa smirked. Then she bowed her head and replied softly, "If I like any clothes, I will buy them myself. Why must I beg a man to give them to me?" Jiang Kam too taunted again. "Beg? I am currently carrying the reincarnation of a true dragon. Do I still need to beg?" "Oh!" Jiang Kam Hoa nonchalantly reached out and touched her earrings. She moved closer to Jiang Kam too. "Older sister suddenly feels a bit expectant for my nephew/niece to be born." She flashed a cunning smile in front of Jiang Kam too, leaving her stunned. At the same time, Tran Lin Nok and another girl cheerfully approached as "O consort Xian is here." The two quickly and happily linked arms with Jiang Kam too. "Your Highness, let's go sit over here. Let us bask in some of your noble aura." The girl beside her teased. From afar, I could see a menacing aura from this side. Jiang Kam too was silent at this, only glancing over to this side. Jiang Kam Hoa gently sat down next to Kan Nam Kwang. She lifted the wine jug, making Kan Nam Kwang panic. Seeing him like this, Jiang Kam Hoa smiled brightly. "If you want a drink, just say so. It's not like I won't let you drink." Kan Nam Kwang held his wine cup. Kam, aren't you angry?" Jiang Kam Hoa raised her wine cup. "Good wine, delicious food. What is there to be angry about?" "It's just," she suddenly paused. "This wine has a cold nature. Not everyone can drink it." Immediately, on the other side, a wine cup fell to the ground. "Aya, what's wrong with consort Xian?" Kan Nam Khan panicked. "Summon the imperial physician." His face turned pale with worry. "Quickly, summon the imperial physician." The imperial physician quickly entered. Kan Nam Kwang asked Jiang Kam Hoa, Kam, aren't you worried?" Jiang Kam Hoa replied, "I'm sitting so far away from them, and besides, all the food was brought up by the imperial kitchen. No matter how you put it, it has nothing to do with me. Why should I be worried?" Kan Nam Kwang looked at her that. Jiang Kam Hoa suddenly sighed. Sigh. She passed some food to him. "Sixth Prince, you should eat quickly. In a moment, you won't be able to eat anymore." Jiang Kam Hoa asked with a bright smile, "Is it delicious?" Kan Nam Kwang blushed. "Delicious." The imperial physician bowed his head and said, "Your Majesty, please forgive me." "Your Highness, please forgive me. This servant's medical skills are poor. I cannot find a reason for consort Xian's stomach pain." The emperor quickly ordered, "Kam Hoa, we know your medical skills are brilliant. You go take a look." Kan Nam Khan said quietly. So many imperial physicians couldn't figure it out. How could she possibly know? The emperor continued, "Are you questioning our decision?" Kan Nam Khan bowed his head. "Your son wouldn't dare." A moment later, Jiang Kam Hoa went to examine Jiang Kam too. She closed her eyes tightly, then reported, "Reporting to your Majesty, this humble woman has diagnosed that consort Xian's sudden abdominal pain and discomfort is because her monthly period has arrived." Kan Nam Khan was furious. "Impossible." He pointed at Jiang Kam Hoa. "You must be jealous of us, so you're deliberately slandering Kam too." Jiang Kam Hoa remained silent. At this moment, Kan Nam Kwang stepped forward, quickly speaking up for her. "Kam Hoa, is this prince's princess consort? Watch your tone." Kan Nam Khan gritted his teeth. His murderous eyes met Kan Nam Kwang's. Seeing this, the emperor's face turned pale. To resolve the matter, Jiang Kam Hoa peeked out and spoke up, "Your Majesty. The Imperial Astronomical Bureau predicted that the fetus in Consort Xian's womb is the reincarnation of a true dragon. A true dragon is not the same as a mortal." This humble woman read Consort Xian's pulse as if it were her monthly period. "But I overlooked that a true dragon is not immortal. It is this humble woman's fault. My diagnosis was wrong." The imperial physician and two others looked at each other worriedly. "How can this be her fault?" "That's right." The emperor fell silent. On this side, Jiang Kam too was trembling. The emperor then waved his hand. "If she is unwell, Prince Xian, take her back to your manor." Kin Nam Khan bowed his head and replied, "Yes." A moment later outside, Kin Nam Kwang asked Jiang Kam Hoa, Kam, what was really going on with your diagnosis today?" Jiang Kam Hoa said, "I did not misdiagnose. Jiang Kam too is indeed on her monthly period." Kin Nam Kwang was worried. "The whole city knows she is pregnant, making fourth brother rush to bring her home. How can she be on her monthly period?" Jiang Kam Hoa smiled. "How do you know if her pregnancy is real or fake?" Kin Nam Kwang touched her shoulder. "Could it be that she isn't? But that is the crime of deceiving the emperor." Jiang Kam Hoa chuckled softly. She touched her finger to his lips. "Shoo, she's not that stupid. She also thinks she's pregnant." Kin Nam Khan also sent people to investigate. She looked at Kin Nam Kwang with sparkling eyes. "But what if I told you the thing I gave her to eat can alter her pulse?" Then Kin Nam Kwang took Jiang Kam Hoa's hand. "This trick of yours is truly..." Jiang Kam Hoa smiled. "Truly what?" She looked up at Kin Nam Kwang with a slight glance. "Truly vicious?" She recalled the past. "They humiliated me and almost killed me." Jiang Kam Hoa said, trembling, "If I let them off so easily, how can the resentment in my heart ever dissipate?" Kin Nam Kwang gently kissed Jiang Kam Hoa's hand, looking at her with a loving gaze. "From now on, your revenge, I will help you take it. Your grievances, I will resolve them with you." He moved closer to Jiang Kam Hoa. "Whoever dares to bully my princess consort, I will make them pay tenfold, all right?" Jiang Kam Hoa blushed and replied softly, "All right." At Prince Xian's manor, Jiang Kam too was stunned by a slap. Kin Nam Khan asked as he hit her, "What exactly is going on?" Jiang Kam too gently placed her hand on the table. "He cannot know how I got pregnant." She trembled with fear. "Otherwise, I won't even know when I die." Jiang Kam too now replied, "I don't know either. However, it must be because Jiang Kam Hoa is jealous of me, colluding with the imperial physician to frame me." Kin Nam Khan asked with a stern face, "You're on your monthly period." Jiang Kam too was anxious. "How can that be? Your Highness, if you don't believe me, you can summon a physician here." Kin Nam Khan crossed his arms and thought, "Indeed, I found over 10 physicians before. All of them said she was pregnant." Kin Nam Khan's eyes widened. "If I find out you're hiding anything from me..." Jiang Kam too's eyes were filled with fear, not daring to make a sound at all. Kin Nam Khan turned his head. "I will absolutely not forgive you." With that, he left. Only then did Jiang Kam too breathe a sigh of relief. Tan Ni entered and called out, "Your Highness." Jiang Kam too ordered, "Tomorrow, go walk around the streets and find me a blind Taoist priest." "Yes." On this side, Jiang Kam Hoa and Kin Nam Kwang were happily lying down, enjoying the breeze. Kin Nam Kwang gently rested his head, looking infatuatedly at Jiang Kam Hoa. The beautiful Jiang Kam Hoa was sleeping soundly under the gentle sunlight. At this moment, Noyet Lin ran over excitedly. "Young miss, this servant saw Tan Ni on the street." Jiang Kam Hoa sat up. Tan Ni was alone, with no guards following. Noyet Lin replied, "There was no one else." Jiang Kam Hoa guessed. Jiang Kam too is deceiving Kin Nam Khan. That's really not good. Suddenly, Kin Nam Kwang pointed to Jiang Kam Hoa's forehead. "My princess consort, what are you plotting now?" Kin Nam Kwang chuckled to himself. "My princess consort is so adorable even when she's harming people." Jiang Kam Hoa blushed and turned away. Then she took out a vial of medicine and gave it to Noyet Lin. "Take this to the half-immortal. Let him sell it to Tan Ni." Noyet Lin asked, "For how many taels of silver?" Jiang Kam Hoa made a hand gesture. 30,000 taels. Kin Nam Kwang leaned in close to her. 30,000 taels for one dose. First sell her 3 months' worth. Noyet Lin was stunned. "Isn't that too much? Last time, just 10,000 taels already drained the second young Mrs. funds." Jiang Kam Hoa smiled. "Jiang Kam too has no money, but the fourth prince does." Last time, When confronting Kinam Khan, Kinam Kwang asked, military power and Jiang Kam Hoa. Which you choose? This prince may not have military power, but I won't let you live comfortably either. At this time, on Jiang Kam Tu's side, a plate fell to the ground and shattered. What? Jiang Kam Tu was horrified. He sold me fake medicine. I'm not actually pregnant. Tan Ni replied. For the future medicine, he's demanding 30,000 taels a month. Jiang Kam Tu was worried. How can I get that much silver for him? Tan Ni suggested. Your Highness, perhaps you should go find the fourth prince. Jiang Kam Tu thought to herself, everyone knows I'm carrying the reincarnation of a true dragon. Kinam Khan wouldn't dare do anything to me. As long as I can deceive them, whether I'm really pregnant or not doesn't matter anymore. Previously, her maid had said, noble consort, the person has been brought. After all, the noble consort has already found many pregnant women for him to keep in the side palace. The noble consort was delighted. Good. Even if Jiang Kam Tu's baby is a girl, this palace is not afraid. As long as a boy is born, he will be my son. Jiang Kam Tu said with a cunning look on her face, comb my hair and change my clothes for me. I'm going to find the fourth prince. Jiang Kam Tu went and knelt before Kinam Khan, telling him everything. Kinam Khan frowned and looked at her, asking, you're saying you're not pregnant? Terrified, Jiang Kam Tu trembled and confessed everything that I did it because of the medicine that half immortal sold me. But his medicine can indeed alter my pulse. Kinam Khan angrily slapped her. He rubbed his wrist, his face dark, and ordered his subordinate in a low voice, go take 90,000 taels to buy the medicine. Confirm that it's effective, then get rid of him. That subordinate quickly replied yes. At the sixth prince's manor, a stack of banknotes was passed over. Jiang Kam Hoa held the stack of banknotes in her hand. Smiling happily, I told you the fourth prince had money. Kinam Kwang smiled gently at her. Whatever the princess consort says is right. The half-immortal standing beside them smiled at her and asked, Your Highness, what should we do next? Jiang Kam Hoa frowned and looked at him, asking, You're calling me Your Highness. Has your prince agreed to that? The half-immortal looked at Kinam Kwang, who was smiling gently at Jiang Kam Hoa, and laughed as he replied, The prince of course agrees. Jiang Kam Hoa coughed in embarrassment. The grand wedding hasn't even happened yet. How improper. Use a different form of address. Ban Tin looked at her respectfully and replied, Yes, Your Highness. Jiang Kam Hoa's face darkened. She gritted her teeth angrily and said, Ban Tien, are you a fast runner? Seeing her meaningful smile, Ban Tien was so scared he got goosebumps. It's all right. Jiang Kam Hoa let out a sinister laugh as she looked at him. The next day, two men were chasing another person through the streets. Stop, don't run. Ban Tin, with a white cloth over his eyes, ran for his life. Your Highness, you can't frame me like this. The two men behind him were in hot pursuit. After him. One of them couldn't run anymore and stopped, panting heavily. Can't catch up. The one beside him looked at him and asked, Where did you write his house was in the report? You reported Jiang Kam Hoa. Those two officials looked around and said, Let's go, search the house. A man in brown clothes looked at the two officials in surprise. What is happening here? His friend in dark blue clothes beside him also followed his gaze and said, I heard this Ban Tin sells fake medicine. A certain lady used it to harm a concubine in her household, resulting in a death. The Dalai Temple is looking for him. The man in brown clothes frowned and said, The capital has been really unstable lately. I heard that a few days ago, the life star of the true dragon also dimmed and disappeared. His friend beside him asked in surprise, There's such a thing? At Ban Tien's residence, two officials from the Dalai Temple were ransacking his house. One of them flipped open a book, looked at it, and said hurriedly, There's a discovery here. Everyone come and see. March 10th, second Miss Jiang bought 1 bottle of medicine, 10,000 taels of silver. March 15th, the fourth prince bought 3 bottles of medicine, 90,000 taels of silver. The two Dalai Temple officials were stunned. Hey, report this to His Majesty quickly. In the imperial palace, the emperor's face was dark as he looked at the memorial in his hand. He angrily slammed the memorial on the table, furious, and roared, Summon Prince Jin and Jiang Kam Hoa to the palace tomorrow. After speaking, the emperor glanced at Jin Nanqing and Jiang Kam, two kneeling on the ground, his eyes narrowing as for these two scoundrels. Continue kneeling here for us. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed. Jin Nanjiang and Jiang Kam Hoa entered the main hall, looked at the emperor, and asked, "Father Emperor, what is this?" The emperor's expression was cold. His hand holding the memorial trembled with anger. "Go ask these two scoundrels." The emperor threw the memorial forcefully at Jin Nanqing. Jin Nanqing was frightened and quickly cried out about the injustice. "Your son has been wronged. Father Emperor, you cannot convict your son based on the account book of a swindler." The emperor rested his hand on his forehead and looked at him coldly. "Fine, then let Jiang Kam Hoa check her pulse. Let's see what kind of pulse it is." Jiang Kam too was stunned. Jin Nanqing's face changed as he shot her a cold glance. Jiang Kam Hoa slowly walked over. Jiang Kam too looked at Jiang Kam Hoa in fear. "Older sister, you must not wrongly accuse me. You can't let me die like this." Jiang Kam Hoa gave her a cold look. "If you have truly deceived the sovereign, I can only uphold justice, even if it means sacrificing family." After she finished checking Jiang Kam too's pulse, she looked at the emperor and reporting to your majesty. "She's not yet pregnant." The emperor looked at her and asked, "You haven't checked her pulse yet?" Jiang Kam Hoa replied respectfully, "There is no need to check her pulse. This subject received news this morning. I interrogated Consort Xian's personal maid, Qing'er, and she said that Jiang Kam too is still a virgin." Jiang Kam too's eyes widened. She shouted agitatedly, "You're lying?" Qing basically knows nothing at all. Jiang Kam Hoa glanced at her and said indifferently, "His Majesty can call a mama to verify." The emperor then gave the order, "Summon her." A faint fragrance wafted through the room. The mama knelt on the ground and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, Consort Xian is indeed still a virgin." Jiang Kam too trembled with fear. Jin Nanqing's whole body stiffened, his expression one of shock and disbelief. He suddenly let out a laugh that was both desolate and sarcastic. The emperor angrily slammed his hand on the table and roared, "How audacious of you to dare deceive us! Issue the decree. Prince Xian, Jin Nanqing, is treasonous and has deceived the sovereign. Strip him of his title and confine him to the Xian residence. As for Consort Jiang Kam too, send her in to accompany him. They are forbidden from ever stepping out of the residence for the rest of their lives." The deputy director of the Imperial Astronomy Bureau was also arrested. The director of the Imperial Astronomy Bureau accepted bribes, deceiving heaven and the people, and is to be prepared for execution. Jin Nanjiang saw that Jiang Kam Hoa's face was full of thoughts. He held her hand tightly. Jiang Kam Hoa snapped back to her senses and gave him a forced smile. "I suddenly remembered some old things." Jin Nanjiang gently hugged her to comfort her. "Don't be afraid. From now on, you still have me. I will definitely not let you be heartbroken again." Jiang Kam Hoa looked at him, moved. "Okay." She smiled happily and wrapped her arms around Jin Nanjiang's neck. "Jiang Kam Hoa, I consider this as avenging you, helping you see clearly. From now on, you won't have to suffer anymore. I hope in the next life, you can live a peaceful and happy life." The carriage stopped in front of the Prime Minister's residence. Jin Nanjiang and Jiang Kam Hoa stepped out of the carriage. Yuling, who was waiting outside the gate, saw her return and hurried over, saying, "Mississippi concubine Shun has returned." The sound of hurried footsteps echoed. A group of servants rushed forward and surrounded them. One of them, with his arms crossed, looked at Jiang Kam Hoa with a cold smile. "Miss Jiang, please go in. Prime Minister Jiang has been waiting for you for a long time." In the guest room, Jiang Kam Hoa walked in and was surprised to see two men kneeling on the floor. Then she looked at the Prime Minister, who was sitting on a chair with a cold expression, and called out softly, "Father, what is going on?" The Prime Minister narrowed his eyes and looked at her angrily. "You still have the face to call me father? If it weren't for your concubine mother." One of the kneeling men looked at her in fear and said, "Eldest miss, we received your instructions to assassinate the Prime Minister. You can't just leave us to die." Jiang Kam Hoa looked at him, stunned. The Prime Minister looked at her with a pained expression and said, "If your concubine mother hadn't risked her life to block a knife for me, I would have already lost my life on the road." Jin Nanjiang looked at him, annoyed, and asked, "Prime Minister Jiang, this prince and Kam are about to be married. What benefit is there in assassinating you at this time?" The two assassins kneeling on the floor had a sudden thought. One of them quickly took a letter out of his sleeve. "Yesterday at the hour of high, in the temple in the south of the city, the eldest miss personally brought us the silver and also left a letter to assassinate the Prime Minister. He then handed the letter to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister opened the letter, his eyes filled with shock, and his whole body trembled. It's your handwriting. What else do you have to explain? Jiang Kamhoa let out a cold smile. She bent over, her body shaking with laughter. If I met you in person, what couldn't be said face to face? Why would I need to write a letter and leave you with such a weakness? The assassin jumped in fright, looked at the Prime Minister fearfully, and quickly changed his testimony. I misremembered. It was Yu Ling who came, not the eldest Mississippi. The Prime Minister frowned and looked at her coldly, asking, if you didn't do this, where were you yesterday at the hour of high? Jiang Kamhoa answered calmly, in the Wuhua courtyard of the residence. The Prime Minister continued to ask, who can testify for you? Yu Ling's words are not credible. Jiang Kamhoa was annoyed internally. This old man is truly stubborn and old-fashioned. Suddenly, a hand wrapped around her waist. Jiang Kamhoa was startled. Jin Nanjiang pulled her into his arms, looked at the Prime Minister, and said, what if this prince can testify? He looked tenderly at Jiang Kamhoa in his arms. This prince and the princess consort are inseparable day and night. Therefore, for the past 2 nights, I have secretly entered the Wuhua courtyard, and only then did the princess consort go to sleep. Prime Minister Jiang wouldn't be angry about this, would he? Jiang Kamhoa's face flushed red with embarrassment. Even if you're helping me out, do you have to say it like that? Jin Nanjiang glanced at the 2 assassins and continued coldly. This prince's dungeon has recently been renovated. Perhaps in a different place, you 2 might be able to speak the truth. The 2 assassins were terrified and quickly kowtowed on the ground, begging, Your Highness, spare our lives. This slave will say everything. It was concubine Chun who bribed us, wanting to use a self-harm ploy to frame the eldest Mississippi. The Prime Minister was stunned and looked at Jiang Kamhoa guiltily. Kamhoa, it was I who misunderstood you. Jiang Kamhoa cut him off indifferently. Father, if you don't have even a shred of trust in Kamhoa, then us living together will only be more awkward. Yu Ling, let's go. We're moving out. After speaking, she turned and left. Jiang Kamhoa puffed her cheeks in anger and stormed off. Jin Nanjiang followed behind, chuckling as he looked at her. This prince's side hall is still empty if you have nowhere else to go. Jiang Kamhoa was silent for a moment, thinking. She then slung her arm around Yu Ling's shoulder and said with a cheerful smile, Yu Ling, let's go. We're going to buy a small courtyard. Jin Nanjiang, getting the cold shoulder, had his face darken. Yi Qing, standing behind him, covered his mouth and chuckled. Late at night, an owner opened the door and looked at Jiang Kamhoa awkwardly. This house is not for sale. Jiang Kamhoa looked at him, stunned. Another innkeeper gave a forced, awkward smile and said, the inn is full. Miss, please go somewhere else. Jiang Kamhoa looked at him angrily, but I just saw an empty room. Seeing the murderous glare from Jin Nanjiang behind her, the innkeeper sighed fearfully in his heart. With this gentleman here, who would dare to let you in? Jiang Kamhoa puffed her cheeks and looked at Jin Nanjiang angrily. Jin Nanjiang smiled gently at her. See, you still have to come back to this prince's residence. Jiang Kamhoa looked at him, troubled. We're not married yet. I don't want people to gossip. Jin Nanjiang affectionately booped her nose. With me here, who would dare to gossip about you? Late at night, lanterns filled the sky. Jin Nanjiang took Jiang Kamhoa's hand and pulled her along. Cam, let's go home. The next day at the 6th prince's residence, someone entered and shouted angrily, Jiang Kamhoa, get out here. Jiang Kamhoa, if you have any shame, get the hell out here for me. Hearing this shout, Jiang Kamhoa, who was reading a book, jumped in surprise. She turned her head to look at Yi Qing and asked, what's going on? Quick, go and see. A young lady in a red outfit, holding a leather whip, stood angrily at the door. Seeing her, Yi Qing's face changed. This is bad. It's Princess Hong. His Highness left the capital this morning, so now there's no one who can stop her. Princess Hong Zhu crossed her arms, looking arrogantly at Jiang Kamhoa and asking, You're Jiang Kamhoa? Jiang Kamhoa smiled at her and asked, And who are you? Why have you come here calling my name? Princess Hong Zhu angrily brandished her whip. Are your dog eyes blind? This princess is the one and only princess of the royal family, Princess Hong Zhu. Jiang Kamhoa smiled at her and apologized. So, is Princess Hongzhu my apologies? Princess Hongzhu glared at her angrily. This is the 6th royal brother's residence. You wild woman, if you know what's good for you, get out of here. Zhang Kamhoa looked at Princess Hongzhu and softly called out Datan. Datan, standing behind her, quickly replied, "Yes, your ladyship." Princess Hongzhu angrily rushed forward and beat him relentlessly. "Who allowed you to call her your ladyship? Who allowed you?" Datan, terrified, covered his head and answered weakly, "It was the prince's regulation." Zhang Kamhoa turned her head to look at Princess Hongzhu and said, "Princess, it was your 6th royal brother who used every means possible to beg his majesty to let him marry me. I hope you will remember this point clearly." Princess Hongzhu turned her head, pouting angrily at her. She snorted coldly and angrily turned to leave. Late at night, Kanam Kang smiled at Zhang Kamhoa and asked, "I used every means possible begging to marry you." "You were right." After speaking, he leaned down and placed on her lips a kiss. Kanam Kang pressed Zhang Kamhoa against the wall. The two of them, with 4 eyes locked and cheeks flushed, looked at each other. Zhang Kamhoa looked at him helplessly. As a modern person, I'm being repeatedly teased by an ancient person. Her face darkened as she pouted angrily. "I'm not having it." Kanam Kang was surprised to see her suddenly get angry. Zhang Kamhoa suddenly grabbed his collar, stood on her tiptoes, and forcibly kissed him. Kanam Kang's whole body stiffened as he looked at her in surprise. A moment later, the two separated, faces flushed and panting. Zhang Kamhoa looked at him seriously and asked, "How was that?" Kanam Kang lowered his eyes and was silent for a moment. Suddenly, he hugged her tightly and placed a deep kiss on her lips. Zhang Kamhoa's face flushed red. Her hand placed on his chest clenched into a fist. A moment later, Kanam Kang released her and said gently, "After the wedding, I definitely won't let you off so easily." Zhang Kamhoa's small face flushed bright red. She crossed her arms and pouted angrily. It was clearly about Hongzhu at first. How did it turn into this? It's all because I suddenly got competitive with him. 2 cups of hot tea were poured. Kanam Kang picked up a teacup and looked at her with difficulty. Hongzhu's health has been poor since childhood, so she went to the south to recuperate. She only returned to the capital today. Zhang Kamhoa, holding a teacup, looked at him and asked, "Then why is she so hostile towards me?" Kanam Kang gave a forced smile and replied, "She has been a bit arrogant since she was young. She probably heard many rumors about you on her way back. More importantly, guess who brought her back to the capital?" Zhang Kamhoa looked at him curiously and asked, "Who was it?" Kanam Kang sighed and said, "The crown prince of the Chu state, Soviet. The world is currently divided into 5 nations, of which the Chu state is the weakest. The Chu state relies on its treacherous terrain and its expertise in poison making, which is why it hasn't been swallowed by the stronger nations. It is said that the crown prince of Chu is a man of deep thoughts. This time, by bringing Hongzhu back, he probably intends to form an alliance for protection." Zhang Kamhoa's eyes lit up as she looked at him and asked, "Wait a minute, you're saying everyone from the Chu state is a genius at using poison?" Kanam Kang chuckled at her. "After all that talk, that's the only point you remembered." Zhang Kamhoa stood up and went to sit next to Kanam Kang. If he is skilled in using poison, he might know how to cure the cold poison. Kanam Kang smiled at her and said, "Father Emperor will hold a palace banquet to entertain Soviet. If you promise this prince one thing, I will take you with me." Zhang Kamhoa looked at him and asked, "What is it?" Kanam Kang looked at her seriously and said, "You are not allowed to talk to Soviet." Zhang Kamhoa covered her mouth and giggled at him. "Yes, your highness, jealous." Kanam Kang, having been hit where it hurts, blushed in embarrassment. This prince is not jealous. This prince is many times more handsome than him. Zhang Kamhoa laughed so hard her whole body shook. "Admit it, you are jealous." Hearing this, Kanam Kang became even more embarrassed. "Stop laughing. This prince is not jealous." Late at night, the candles in the room were lit. A blue-haired man holding a book smiled calmly as he listened to Hongzhu speak. "You tell me, what kind of poison goddess, or whatever she is, who knows if she's even managed to marry the 6th brother yet? And she's already got Datan calling her your ladyship. Shameless. The man smiled and said, "But I heard that His Highness Prince Ken is very fond of that young lady." Hong Zhu, holding a pastry, said angrily, "That poison woman must have cast some spell on him." The man chuckled and wiped the pastry crumbs from her face. "You little glutton, you've got food on your face. Where is your princess-like demeanor?" Hong Zhu's cheeks flushed red. She scrambled to her feet in embarrassment. "And my clothes are dirty. I'll go change." After saying that, Hong Zhu quickly ran out. After she left, the man's gentle, smiling expression suddenly turned cold. He lowered his head and muttered, "Zhang Gamhua." In a capital city, a beautifully made-up Zhang Cam Hoa entered a tea house. The people around saw her and began to whisper, "Is that Princess Can? Don't talk nonsense. She's not married yet. Isn't it just a matter of time? Look, they're always together." Hong Zhu, who was happily talking with Kanam Kang, saw her arrive and gave a triumphant smile. "The seat's been taken." Suddenly, a person walked up to Zhang Cam Hoa and called out softly, "Miss Zhang, my master would like to have a word with you. Could you please come over?" Zhang Cam Hoa looked at him and asked, "Who is your master?" The servant pointed towards the blue-haired man. The blue-haired man, holding a teacup, smiled at her and introduced himself. "I am So Viet. I have admired Miss Zhang for a long time. I wonder if I might have the honor of speaking with you." Zhang Cam Hoa walked over and smiled at him. "So, is the crown prince of the Chu state. As it happens, I also have a matter I wish to ask you about." Ken Nam Kang turned his head and saw her. And So Viet laughing and talking happily, and his face darkened. "Over here." So Viet smiled at Zhang Cam Hoa and said, "Miss Zhang, if you don't mind, you can sit next to me." Ken Nam Kang spoke up angrily and coldly, "You cannot." He walked over and pulled Zhang Cam Hoa into his arms, his expression cold and sharp as he looked at So Viet. So Viet's face remained smiling as he looked at him. Ken Nam Kang and So Viet locked eyes, neither willing to back down. Ken Nam Kang stood in front of Zhang Cam Hoa. His eyes narrowed as he looked coldly at So Viet. Hong Zhu ran over, looking at the three of them in surprise. So Viet. She ran to So Viet's side, looking at him angrily and pouting. "Sixth royal brother is so unreasonable." So Viet smiled at her and asked, "What's wrong?" Hong Zhu said angrily, "I had just sat down, and sixth brother immediately shooed me away, saying something about how the seat next to him can only be for Zhang Cam Hoa." Seeing Ken Nam Kang with his arm around Zhang Cam Hoa's shoulder as they left, Hong Zhu was fuming. "I'm so mad." So Viet narrowed his eyes, his gaze sinister. "Indeed, it is very infuriating." Looking at the food laid out on the table, Ken Nam Kang silently watched Zhang Cam Hoa eat with gusto. Seeing him staring at her, Zhang Cam Hoa felt unnatural and asked him, "Is there something on my face?" Ken Nam Kang looked at her irritably. "Oh, you still remember what you promised this prince 2 days ago?" Zhang Cam Hoa looked at him blankly and asked, "What was it?" Ken Nam Kang turned his face away. "You are not to talk to So Viet." Zhang Cam Hoa was stunned and looked at him helplessly. She quickly explained, "I thought that since people from the Chu state are experts in poison, they must know about many types of poisons. Perhaps he has a way to cure the cold poison. Besides, it was Hong Zhu who took my seat first." She angrily pinched his ear. "I'm not even the one who's upset. What are you so angry about?" Ken Nam Kang winced. "Even so, it's not allowed." Zhang Cam Hoa sighed. "Your Highness, don't throw a tantrum for no reason. People will laugh if they see." Ken Nam Kang rubbed his ear, his face full of jealousy. "That I don't like the way he looks at you." He glanced at So Viet on the opposite side. "That I can guarantee. That man has designs on Cam Hoa." So Viet gave a cold smile. Zhang Cam Hoa turned her head and saw So Viet smiling and raising his teacup to her. She immediately raised her teacup in a toast to him. Seeing Zhang Cam Hoa drinking tea with him, Ken Nam Kang's face darkened. Soon, the food on the plate was all eaten. Zhang Cam Hoa rested her face in her hand. Her cheeks flushed and smiled at Ken Nam Kang, asking, "I got carried away with the wine and am a little drunk. Does your Highness want to go outside with me?" Ken Nam Kang sulkily turned his face away, thinking with a pout, "Hurry up and console me. If you console me, I'll go with you." Seeing Zhang Cam Hoa stand up, Ken Nam Kang was stunned. He pouted angrily as he watched her just walk away. Zhang Cam Hoa walked alone down the dark corridor. She sighed inwardly. "Oh no, I think I'm lost." Suddenly, she heard voices talking outside. "How many taels did Consort Chen give you?" "About 100 taels. I've never seen so much silver before." "More silver means a harder job." The two maids whispered outside. "That's right. The palace is hosting a banquet for the crown prince of Chu, and security is tight. Yet the consort told me to poison Zhang Cam Hoa today. If we get caught, we'll surely be beheaded. Jiang Kam Hoa, hiding in a corner, looked at the two palace maids in shock. She covered her mouth in fear and backed away. Unfortunately, she stepped on a stone under her foot, making a sound. The two palace maids turned their heads warily. Who's there? Jiang Kam Hoa's face changed. This is bad. How did I wander in a consort? Chen's palace. She quickly turned to run. The maid frowned and shouted, "Catch her!" Suddenly, a servant appeared and blocked her path. Looking at the two tall men in front of her, Jiang Kam Hoa's face darkened. I'm done for. The two palace maids also walked over, smiling coldly at her. "Miss Jiang, Consort Chen wishes to see you for a moment." Jiang Kam Hoa turned her head, smiled at the palace maid, and said, "All right, lead the way." A moment later, Jiang Kam Hoa stepped inside. Consort Chen saw her and gave a sinister smile. "Miss Jiang has arrived. Quick, sit here." Jiang Kam Hoa silently looked at her. Consort Chen said indifferently, "Kan Ni and Jiang Kam, two committed treason. At first, I was very angry with you, but on second thought, they brought it upon themselves. So today, I wanted to explain things to you." Jiang Kam Hoa gave a forced laugh and asked, "What does Consort Chen want to explain to me?" She picked up the wine cup on the table, the corners of her lips curling into a cold smile. "Regret for condoning your child poisoning me, or regret for drugging me, so he could humiliate me, or perhaps regret for sending assassins to kill me." Jiang Kam Hoa raised the wine cup, smiling coldly as she looked directly into Consort Chen's eyes. "If you already intend to poison my tea, why bother with this pretense?" Consort Chen's face darkened. A glint appeared in her eyes. "I originally wanted to leave you with some dignity, but you are ungrateful. Guards, seize her for me. She absolutely cannot be allowed to leave here alive." Hearing the order, the palace maids advanced and surrounded Jiang Kam Hoa. Jiang Kam Hoa silently looked at them. What should I do now? Elsewhere, Can Nam Quang sat alone, brooding, with one hand propping up his chin and the other holding a wine cup. Moreover, a sense of unease suddenly grew in his heart. He looked at the small wine pot on the table, his brows furrowing slightly. Why hasn't Kam Hoa returned yet? Can Nam Quang order Datan behind him? Datan, call the shadow guards and find out where the princess consort is. Datan quickly replied yes. Consort Chun ordered the palace maids, kill her. Don't let her get out of here alive. Jiang Kam Hoa's brows knitted tightly as she looked at the surrounding palace maids. What now? How can I escape? Suddenly, the door to the room was forcefully pushed open, and Can Nam Quang strode in with a cold, furious expression. Jiang Kam Hoa looked at him in astonishment. Can Nam Quang spoke coldly. This prince would really like to see. He pulled Jiang Kam Hoa into his arms and glanced coldly at the people around them, who won't be leaving here alive today. Jiang Kam Hoa looked at him in surprise. Weren't you angry and ignoring me? Can Nam Quang snorted and looked at her. We'll settle the score when we get back. Can Nam Quang shot a cold glance at Consort Chen. Sending assassins wasn't enough. Now, Consort Chen wants to poison her directly. Consort Chen picked up her wine cup and said with a smile, "You can't just say whatever you want." She looked at the two of them and gave a cold laugh. "What proof do you have that I did it? As for this poison cup of tea, I intended to use it for rat poison. Is there a problem with that?" Can Nam Quang narrowed his eyes at her. In that case. It seems this prince has offended you." After speaking, he took Jiang Kam Hoa's hand. "Let's go." Suddenly, Can Nam Quang stopped and glanced at Consort Chen. "All right. I heard fourth brother has a lot of rats in the Forbidden Palace. Why don't we take the effective rat poison you mentioned and gift it to fourth brother?" Consort Chun was stunned, then fell into an angry silence. Can Nam Quang wrapped an arm around Jiang Kam Hoa's waist and carried her away. Suddenly, he slumped against her shoulder, his face pale. Jiang Kam Hoa worriedly supported him. "You were just fine a moment ago. Why is the poison acting up now?" Blood trickled from the corner of Can Nam Quang's mouth. "You made me so angry earlier, and then I rushed over as soon as I got the news from the shadow guards. The surge of my chi and blood caused the poison to flare up." He pulled his hand back and frowned at her. "Weren't you ignoring me? You can go. You don't need to worry about me." Seeing him acting childish again, Jiang Kam Hoa felt exasperated. "If you don't want me to go, you can just say so." Can Nam Quang stammered, "This prince is not saying that." Jiang Kam Hoa grabbed his hand firmly and pulled him along. Let's go. We'll go back to the manor and treat you. Kinam Kwong thought to himself, why does this blood-packed Datan gave me smell so fishy? Never mind. This trick worked. I'll spare him when we get back. Suddenly, someone ran up to them. Miss Jiang. Soviet's servant looked at Jiang Kamhoa and said, my master invites you to meet him at the post house tomorrow. Again, Kinam Kwong held her tightly and said, you're not going. Jiang Kamhoa chuckled and patted his head, but be good. Didn't your cold poison just act up? Crown Prince, so might be able to cure it. I have to go ask. Kinam Kwong's face darkened. Looks like I should still give Datan a beating after all. In the post house, a teapot with 2 teacups and a plate of exquisite pastries were set on a table. Soviet picked up his teacup, looked at Jiang Kamhoa, and said, I have difficulty walking, so I've troubled Miss Jiang to make this trip. Jiang Kamhoa picked up her teacup, looked at him, and asked, I wonder what matter Crown Prince so has invited me here to discuss. Soviet looked at her, sighed, and said, I have heard that Miss Jiang's medical skills are superb, so I wanted to ask you to take a look. He lifted his pant leg, revealing a dense network of blue veins on his leg. Can these legs of mine still be cured? Jiang Kamhoa was startled. She observed the blue veins on Soviet's leg. Green silk entanglement. Master once said that this green silk is a living thing that feeds on the host's blood. Soviet's eyes lowered as he said, I was framed by someone. I have traveled across the 5 nations, seeking a cure for my legs. Jiang Kamhoa thought silently, this insidious poison is even rarer than the cold poison. I never expected to encounter it today, but curing it is harder than ascending to the heavens. Soviet's hand clenched his thigh. He narrowed his eyes and suddenly asked, is Miss Jiang looking for a cure for the cold poison? Soviet looked up, smiled at her, and said, one thing for another. How about it? Jiang Kamhoa looked at him in astonishment. She lowered her head in contemplation. He is from the So kingdom. How does he know I'm looking for a cure for the cold poison? It seems this Crown Prince, So, is more cunning than I thought. After thinking for a moment, Jiang Kamhoa stood up and said softly, this poison is exceptionally difficult to cure. Allow me to return and consult my master's books before giving your highness an answer. Having achieved his goal, Soviet smiled and replied, then I shall trouble Miss Jiang. After speaking, Jiang Kamhoa turned and left coldly. After she was gone, Soviet's expression turned grim, his eyes sharp and cold, as long as my legs can be cured. At the 6th prince's manor, Jiang Kamhoa was grinding herbs alone in her room. She thought silently, Crown Prince So appears gentle on the outside, but in reality, he is unfathomably deep. Curing such a scheming person, I wonder if it will affect the politics of Dai then, or not. Suddenly, an angry shout rang out, Jiang Kamhoa. Jiang Kamhoa jumped in surprise. Hong Truck stormed in angrily, looked at her, and scolded, you toad, trying to eat swan meat. Hearing herself called a toad, Jiang Kamhoa's face darkened with anger. Outside, Hong Truck continued to shout, Jiang Kamhoa, I won't allow 6th brother to marry a poisonous woman like you. Toad, poisonous woman. Jiang Kamhoa's face grew even darker with rage. Seething with anger, she grabbed a small jar, walked outside, and poured a pile of insects and bugs on a Hong Truck. Hong Truck screamed in terror. What did you do? Jiang Kamhoa dusted off her hands and looked at her with a cold smile. Didn't you call me a poisonous woman? Hong Truck screamed in fear and anger. Hong Truck screamed in terror. Then turned tail and fled. Datan stepped out with a smile, looking at Jiang Kamhoa with admiration. Your ladyship is formidable. Jiang Kamhoa crossed her arms and asked him, Datan, why do you think the princess is so prejudiced against me? Datan rubbed his head and replied with a forced smile, the princess has been in the southern domain and doesn't know much about your ladyship. I'm afraid she heard some nasty rumors on her way back to the capital. Jiang Kamhoa looked at him and asked further, were the princess and crown prince so together? Datan nodded in reply, yes. At the post house, Soviet was sitting alone in his room, reading a book. Suddenly, the door was kicked open, and Jiang Kamhoa strode in, saying, Soviet. Soviet smiled and looked at her, asking, What brings Miss Jiang here in the middle of the night? Jiang Kamhoa looked at him angrily and demanded, "Why did you speak ill of me in front of the princess?" So Viet feigned surprise. "Huh? Speak ill of you? About what?" Jiang Kamhoa continued irritably. "The princess knows very little about matters in the imperial city. We just met, and she already despises me." Jiang Kamhoa grabbed Viet's wheelchair. Her gaze was cold and sharp as she looked at him. "You must have said something on the road that stuck with the princess." So Viet gave a fake smile and asked, "Is that so?" "The princess was pestering me with old stories on the road." "Did she mention Miss Jiang?" "I can't seem to recall at the moment." Jiang Kamhoa looked at him and said indifferently, "Speaking of which, I also seem to have forgotten some of the medicinal herbs for your highness's antidote." So Viet narrowed his eyes at her. "Then please forgive my humble and shallow knowledge, for I know nothing of the cold poison." Jiang Kamhoa glared at him angrily. She regained her composure and sighed. Jiang Kamhoa sat down and said to So Viet directly, "You and I both stand to gain something from each other. Why must we be at daggers drawn? If your highness helps me by speaking well of me to the princess, it will save me a lot of trouble." She picked up the teapot and poured a cup of tea, "And I can quickly prepare the antidote for your highness. As the crown prince of the So kingdom, your highness should also leave Dai then soon." So Viet picked up his teacup and smiled at her. "In no rush. I have plenty of time. I will not leave until these two legs are cured." He looked at the teacup in his hand and gave a cold laugh. "As for what purpose I have for staying in Dai then, you'll find out soon enough." So Viet gripped his wheelchair, stopping it. "The night is late. Miss Jiang, please see yourself out. If you have time to worry about me, you might as well use it to quickly prepare the antidote." After speaking, he wheeled himself away. Jiang Kamhoa glanced at him. What is his real purpose? A moment later, a voice called out, "Cam Cam, Cam Cam." Jiang Kamhoa finally came back to her senses. Nam Kwang looked at her and asked, "What are you thinking about? You're so lost in thought." Jiang Kamhoa lowered her face and said, "I was thinking about So Viet's reason for staying in Dai then." When Nam Kwang saw her mention another man, he became jealous again. Jiang Kamhoa helplessly hugged his arm and wheedled, "Don't be angry. Don't be jealous." Nam Kwang sighed. "You just take advantage of the fact that I dote on you." He gently stroked her hair. "As for So Viet's matter, we'll find out in a few days." The grand hall of the imperial palace. Chuvet, sitting in a wheelchair, looked at the emperor and said with a smile, "Your Majesty, I admire Princess Hongzhu. I wish to marry the princess and form an alliance between our two nations." The emperor happily agreed. "Excellent. It's rare that Hongzhu herself agrees." The servant beside Chu Viet then presented the marriage proposal to Eunuch Li. "This is the marriage proposal from the state of Chu. I hope your Majesty will accept it." The emperor replied cheerfully, "Good." Jin Nanxiang glanced at the marriage proposal, his brow furrowing. Hongzhu is of marriageable age, but her and Chu Viet. At the sixth prince's manor, Jiang Jinhua rested her chin on her hand and looked at Jin Nanxiang, asking, "Did His Majesty really decree a marriage between Hongzhu and Chu?" Viet, Jin Nanxiang, sitting at his desk, practicing calligraphy, answered her, "Father Emperor fundamentally did not want Hongzhu to be involved in the palace struggles. He used the excuse of recuperation to send her to the southern domain. But since she herself agreed, Father Emperor couldn't just break them up." Jiang Jinhua looked at him and asked,